Hello there, and welcome back. Get yourself comfortable, sort out your pillow, dim whatever needs dimming, because tonight we're going for a slow wander through the Hoenn region. No rush, no plan really, beyond just talking about the place and the creatures that live in it, until you drift off somewhere around the third or fourth Pokémon and don't hear the rest. That's the goal, honestly. If you make it to the end, well done, but I'd rather you didn't. Hoenn is one of my favourites, and I think it's because of the water. If you've played Ruby or Sapphire or Emerald, or the remakes they did years later on the 3DS, you'll know what I mean. It's a region that feels like it's mostly sea. You spend half your journey on the back of something, surfing across these long stretches of blue with little islands dotted about, and it gives the whole place this warm, drowsy, holiday sort of feeling. It came out back in 2002, the third of the main game regions to arrive, and it was the first one that really leaned into that idea of land and sea, being equal partners rather than the land just having a few lakes in it. There's a nice bit of trivia behind that, actually. The whole region is based on a real place, the island of Kyushu down in the south of Japan, and the designers rotated it 90 degrees when they built it, mostly so it fit the screen better. And the fellow who directed a lot of it, Junichi Masuda, said the name Hoenn is meant to suggest something like abundant relations. The bonds between people and their Pokémon, which is a lovely thing to name a region after, if you think about it, and you can sort of feel it once you're playing. There's a gentleness to Hoenn that I don't think every region has. If you want to get properly nerdy about it, and we will, the shape of the map is meant to echo a yin and yang symbol, land and sea as these two balanced forces curled around each other. And there's an old legend baked into the whole thing that says the region was made by two enormous, ancient Pokémon. One of them raised up all the land, and the other filled in all the sea. We'll get to those two much later, near the end, when you're hopefully already half asleep, because they deserve the quiet slot. So that's where we are tonight. A warm, watery region, shaped like a symbol of balance, full of creatures I've got a lot of fondness for. We'll start with the little partners you pick right at the beginning, then we'll wander out onto the routes and meet the everyday ones, the odd ones, the ones nobody talks about, and eventually we'll work our way up to the giants and the guardians. All at an easy pace. If you enjoy this sort of thing, and you want more of it, there's a subscribe button knocking about somewhere, no pressure at all, but that's the last I'll mention it. Right, let's start where every Hoenn journey starts. A small town, a nervous professor, and a bag with 3 Pokémon in it. The first of the 3, and my personal soft spot, is Treecko. If you've ever met one, you'll know the thing about it straight away. It's cool. Not cool as in cold, cool as in unbothered. There's this line in the Pokédex about how Treecko never panics under any situation, and if something bigger glares at it, it'll just glare right back and not give up an inch of ground, which is a lot of attitude for a little green lizard that fits in your hand. I've always liked that about it. It's the sort of starter that looks at the enormous adventure ahead of it and just sort of shrugs. Design-wise, it's based on a gecko, specifically a leaf-tailed gecko, which is a real animal and worth a look if you're ever awake and bored, because they're brilliant at pretending to be a dead leaf. Treecko's got those little leaf-shaped tails and a red belly, and here's the fun detail. The soles of its feet are covered in tiny hooks, hundreds of them, and that lets it climb straight up walls and even walk along ceilings hanging upside down without falling. So while it's giving you the cool, aloof impression, it's also secretly a little parkour expert. There's another sweet bit of lore too, which is that it uses its tail to sense the humidity in the air and predict what the next day's weather will be like. A tiny lizard weatherman. I don't know why I find that so charming, but I do. In battle it leans on speed, and that stays true all the way up the line. Treecko grows into Grovel, which is this lean, fast, sort of raptor-looking thing that darts through forests, and then finally into Sceptile, the big one. Sceptile is genuinely quick. Its speed stat is one of the highest among all the final form starters across the whole series, and the idea is that it's meant to knock you out before you've had a chance to get going. It stays pure grass the whole way, no second type sneaking in, which is unusual and a bit noble in its own way. It just commits to being a leafy lizard from start to finish. Now here's a fun fact that grass type fans have to make peace with. Grass is, statistically, the most resisted type in the whole game. Loads of things shrug it off, so picking Treecko has always quietly been the harder road, the connoisseur's choice, the one you go for when you fancy a bit of a challenge rather than an easy ride. And I have a lot of time for people who pick the hard starter on purpose. There's something in that. If you watch the old anime around that era, you might remember Ash had a Treecko that eventually grew into a Sceptile, and it had that same standoffish charm. Chewed on a little twig, kept its distance, slowly warmed up. It's one of the more memorable ones from the Hoenn seasons, at least in my head. And then much later, when they remade Ruby and Sapphire, Sceptile got a mega evolution, which turned it into this grass and dragon type, absolutely bristling with what looked like Christmas decorations made of seeds. Little red baubles all down its arms and tail. It went from cool and understated to slightly ridiculous, in a way I'm quite fond of. But that's a much later chapter in its life, and not really the point of a starter. The point of a starter is that it's the first friend you make, and Treecko makes a lovely one. Quiet, capable, never flustered. Anyway, one of 3. There's a fiery one in that bag too, and it's about as far from cool and collected as you can get. The second one in the bag is Torchic, and if you're around my age and you watch the anime, you probably don't picture it in the games first. You picture May's little Torchic from the show, the one that was forever getting into trouble, and had this big-eyed, slightly panicky energy about it. That's the version that lodged in my brain anyway. A round orange chick with a couple of tufts on its head, chirping away, generally being adorable and a bit useless in the early days before it grew up into something you really wouldn't want to annoy. Because that's the arc with Torchic, and it's a good one. It starts as this soft little fire chicken, all fluff and no threat, and it evolves into Combusken, which is where things get interesting, because Combusken picks up the fighting type alongside its fire. Suddenly the sweet chick is a gangly teenage kickboxer with strong legs and a bad attitude. And then it becomes Blaziken, which is a proper towering fire and fighting martial artist, with flames coming off its wrists. The whole line is about that turn from harmless to genuinely formidable, and I think that's why so many people got attached to it. Here's a bit of series history for you, the kind of thing I only know because I've spent far too long reading about this. Torchic's line was the first fire and fighting starter, and it set off a bit of a pattern. The next couple of fire starters after it, in the regions that came later, also ended up fire and fighting, to the point where fans started gently teasing the designers about it. So Blaziken's sort of the granddad of a whole tradition. It was there first, and competitively, Blaziken has been a bit of a monster for years. It hits enormously hard, it's fast, and when the remakes came around, it got a mega evolution with an ability that boosts its speed every single turn, which made it so strong it got shuffled off into the higher tiers, where the really scary things live. That's a long way from a fluffy chick tripping over its own feet in a forest. Mind you, I don't want to get too deep into the battle side of it, because that's not really what tonight is about, and also because the numbers put me to sleep, and not in the good way. The point is just that it grows up into something powerful, and it earned it. There's a warmth to the design that I appreciate too, even as this big, serious fighter. Blaziken keeps that bird shape, the beak, the feathery look. It never fully stops being a chicken, which I find quietly funny. You've got this legendary tier martial artist, and it's still, at the end of the day, a very buff chicken. No notes. That's a good design. If you're the sort of person who likes an aggressive, forward-leaning playthrough, Torchic's usually the pick people point you toward, because that fighting typing gives it a good spread of things it can hit, and it just wants to charge in. It's not the careful option. It's the one you choose when you fancy setting things on fire and asking questions later. So that's the fiery one. Sweet little chick, terrifying grown-up. Whole tradition of firefighters trailing behind it. Which leaves the third and final choice in Professor Birch's bag. And it might just be the most famous of the three, though not exactly for reasons anyone planned. Right, the third one. Mudkip. And I can't really talk about Mudkip without talking about the fact that it became famous on the internet in a way absolutely nobody at Nintendo could have predicted, or particularly wanted. There was this phrase that went around the early internet, spelled deliberately wrong, all about whether you liked Mudkips, and it turned into one of those in-jokes that just would not die. For a while there, Mudkip was less a starter Pokémon and more a piece of internet folklore, which is a strange fate for a small mudfish, but there you go. It outgrew its own game. Underneath all that though, it's genuinely a lovely little creature, and probably the most sensible pick of the three if you're new to all this. Mudkips are water type to start, based loosely on a mudskipper and maybe an axolotl, with this big fin on its head and cheeks it uses to sense things. In the water and mud around it, it's cheerful, it's sturdy, and it evolves into Marshtomp, and then Swampert. And the important thing that happens along the way is that it picks up the ground type. So the final form, Swampert, is water and ground. That combination is a big part of why people call Mudkip the safe choice. Being water and ground means it's only really weak to one thing, which is grass. And Swampert's got the bulk to shrug off a lot of what gets thrown at it. It's got the highest raw stat total of the three final forms. It hits hard, it takes a hit and keeps standing. It's not flashy, it's a big, dependable, slightly grumpy-looking amphibian that just gets the job done. And there's a mega form for it as well, from the remakes, which bulks it up even further into this heavy-set thing with enormous arms. There's a practical angle too, especially back in the original games. Hoenn's so watery that you spend ages getting around by surfing, and the Mudkip line was handy for all that travelling about. So on top of being tough, it was useful for actually exploring the place, which mattered more in Hoenn than it did in a lot of regions. You couldn't really see half the map without something that could handle water. I'll be honest, when I was younger, I always went for the cooler looking ones and left Mudkip on the shelf, and I think that was a mistake. There's a lot to be said for the reliable friend, the one that doesn't need much fussing over, that survives the hits that would have knocked out something frailer, that lets you make a few mistakes and doesn't punish you for them. As I've got older, I've come round to Swampert entirely. It's the sort of Pokémon you end up quietly grateful for. So there they are, the three partners of Hoenn, the cool, leafy lizard, the buff fire chicken, and the dependable mudfish that accidentally became an internet legend. Whichever one you reach for, Professor Birch lets you keep it after you've helped him out. And that little moment of helping him out is where we're headed next, because it's also the first time you meet the wild creatures of Hoenn, and they come charging at you before you've even got your bearings. Every Hoenn adventure has the same funny little opening. You've just arrived in Little Root Town, you've barely said hello to anyone, and the region's Pokémon Professor Birch is out doing fieldwork when he gets himself cornered by a wild Pokémon on the grass just outside town. And he's stuck, so he shouts over to you to grab a Pokéball out of his bag, and that's how you end up with your starter. You're not choosing a partner in some grand ceremony. You're grabbing whatever's nearest to rescue a man from a small angry dog, which, when you say it out loud, is a wonderful way to begin an epic journey. In Ruby and Sapphire, the thing menacing him is a Poochyena, and in Emerald they swapped it for a Zigzagoon, and those two happen to be the everyday creatures you'll be tripping over for the whole first stretch of the game. So it's a nice introduction to both. Poochyena's a scruffy little grey dog, a dark type, and it grows into Mightyena, which is a much sleeker, more wolf-like thing that runs in packs. The lore on Mightyena is quite sweet actually, in a loyal sort of way. It's described as being very obedient to a trainer it trusts and respects, sending signals with its tail and its bark. And it's the kind of Pokémon that once it's decided you're its person, is properly devoted. So it looks a bit rough and villainous, and half the bad guys in the game do use them, but underneath, it's a loyal pack animal that just wants a leader worth following. I have a lot of time for that. Zigzagoon is the other one, and it's exactly as its name suggests. A little brown and cream raccoon looking thing that walks in zigzags because it's endlessly curious and rummaging about for anything interesting on the ground. It's got this ability called Pickup, which is the fun one, where it just randomly turns up holding items it's found lying around. You can end up with all sorts of useful bits and bobs simply because your Zigzagoon can't stop hoarding. It evolves into Linoon, which straightens all that zigzagging out into a dead straight sprinter that can hit surprising speeds in a line but is hopeless at turning corners. There's a genuine charm to a creature that's brilliant at exactly one thing and useless at the obvious follow-up. Here's a small fun detail for the collectors among us. Years and years later, in a different region, these two got alternate forms, the Galarian versions, and Zigzagoon's line even gained a whole new final evolution over there, a sort of glam rock badger with face paint. But that's a story for a different region and a different night. In Hoenn, they're just the friendly, ever-present, early route pair, the ones you catch on Route 101 without thinking much about it, and then, if you're anything like me, quietly keep around far longer than you meant to because you got attached. That's the thing about these common ones. Nobody puts them on a poster. They're not going to win you any battles at the top end, but they're the texture of the region. They're the creatures rustling in the grass while you're finding your feet, and there's a warmth to that. You always remember your first catch, even when it's the most ordinary thing in the world. Speaking of ordinary things in the grass, there's a little bug on those early routes that does something genuinely odd when it grows up. And it's the sort of quirk that's kept fans arguing in a friendly way for over 20 years. So here's the odd little thing I mentioned. On those early routes you'll find Wurmple, which is a small red caterpillar, about as humble a Pokémon as exists. Nice enough. Munches on leaves, has a couple of spikes on its tail for keeping predators off. Completely unremarkable, you'd think. Except Wurmple does something almost no other Pokémon does, and it's caused a low hum of mild frustration in trainers for 2 decades. When Wurmple evolves, it can go one of 2 ways, and you don't get to pick. It might become Silcoon, which later opens up into Beautifully, this lovely butterfly with big warm-coloured wings, or it might become Cascoon, which becomes Dustox, a sort of a scruffy purple moth that comes out at night. And which one you get is, as far as anyone can tell, essentially down to a hidden coin flip decided the moment you caught it. Butterfly or moth? You find out only when it's too late to do anything about it. I find this genuinely delightful, and I think it's because it's so unbothered about being fair. Most games would let you steer the outcome somehow. Wurmple just shrugs and hands you a butterfly or a moth based on some invisible dice roll you'll never see. If you are specifically after Beautifully for its looks, and your Wurmple decides it fancies being a moth instead, well, tough. That's the woods for you. Nature does what it likes. And it's a nice excuse to just sit for a moment in the feeling of Petalburg Woods, which is the first proper forest you walk through in Hoenn. It's this dim, green, dappled sort of place, full of bug catchers and rustling undergrowth, and it's where a lot of these little ones live. There's a gentle, unhurried quality to those early forest routes. Nothing much is at stake. You're just wandering under the trees, catching caterpillars, letting the game breathe before it gets going properly. While we're here, I'll give a quick mention to a couple of the other woodland regulars, because they deserve a nod even if they're not headline acts. There's Shroomish, a little round mushroom fellow that hides in the damp leaf litter and, if you bother it, releases spores that'll leave you sneezing. It grows into Breloom, which is a strange and brilliant thing, a grass and fighting type kangaroo mushroom with these stubby arms that can throw a surprisingly quick punch. Breloom's got a bit of a cult following among people who like an oddball, and I count myself among them. There's something very Hoenn about a boxing mushroom. The thing I love about this whole early stretch of the game is that none of it is trying to impress you. It's just quietly building a world. A red caterpillar that can't decide what it wants to be. A mushroom that sneezes on you. A forest with soft light coming through the leaves. It's the calm before anything happens, and honestly, it's my favourite part of a lot of these games. The bits before the plot shows up and starts demanding things of you. But we should move on, because there's a creature you can find not far from here that's one of the most quietly beloved in the whole region. And it's beloved for a reason that's got nothing to do with battling and everything to do with how it feels. Ralts is one of those Pokémon that people get properly attached to, and it's worth slowing right down for, because the whole appeal of it is quiet and emotional rather than loud and powerful. It's tiny, one of the smallest things you'll meet. This little white creature in what looks like an oversized nightgown, with green hair like a bowl cut hiding most of its face, and a couple of red horns poking out the top. Those horns are the heart of it. Ralts is called the feeling Pokémon, and it uses those horns to sense the emotions of the people and Pokémon around it. And here's the part I really like. When it senses warm, happy feelings nearby, its own little body warms up in response. If it picks up hostility, it hides. And if its trainer is in a cheerful mood, Ralts becomes cheerful too, sort of soaking up whatever you're feeling and reflecting it back. It's shy, it usually keeps well away from people, but a genuinely happy person can draw it out. It'll come closer to someone whose heart is in a good place, which is just about the sweetest concept for a Pokémon I can think of. It grows into Kirlia, which develops this graceful, dancerish look and uses its horns to amplify its psychic power, and then it reaches Gardevoir. And this is where the emotional core of the line really lands. Gardevoir is this elegant, gown-like figure, and the lore says it can sense the future, and that its power reaches its absolute peak when it's protecting the trainer it's bonded to. The Pokédex flat out says it'll give its own life to keep its trainer safe. Some of them talk about it being able to warp space and create a small black hole if the person it loves is in real danger. So underneath the calm, floaty, delicate appearance, there's this fierce protective devotion. It's soft right up until the moment you threaten someone it cares about. And then, it's one of the most dangerous things in the region. I find that a properly moving idea for a creature that started life as a shy little thing hiding in the grass. There's a branch in the path too. If a Ralts happens to be male, it can take a different route at the Kirlia stage. Give it a particular stone, the Dawn Stone, and instead of Gardevoir it becomes Galade, which swaps the flowing elegance for a knightly, sword-armed look. Galade's the blade Pokémon, a courteous, disciplined fighter with blades that extend from its elbows, and the lovely detail there is that it's described as being sharply aware of anyone who needs help, and it seeks them out. So the two final forms share the same soul, really. One protects with psychic power and grace, the other with courtesy and a blade, but they're both at their core guardians. That's the whole family's identity. They feel what you feel, and they'll stand in front of you when it matters. There's a nice thematic echo in the games as well, which is that a nervous, gentle boy named Wally, who you meet early on and who isn't in the best of health, ends up with a Ralts as his own first partner. And watching this frail, timid kid bond with this frail, timid little creature, and both of them slowly grow braver together, is one of the quiet emotional threads running through Hoenn. It's never shoved in your face, it's just there if you notice it. Both Gardevoir and Galade got mega evolutions later on, which turn them even more striking, Gardevoir into something that looks almost like a bride in a flowing white gown, its chest plate said to be a physical manifestation of its heart opened up. But honestly, the megaforms aren't the reason people love this line. People love it because of a small creature that warms up when you're happy and hides when you're upset, and grows into something that would put itself between you and the whole world. That's it. That's the appeal. And it's more than enough. After all that tenderness, let's go and meet a Pokémon whose entire personality is that it can't be bothered to do anything at all. Here's a fun fact to ease into this one. There's a Pokémon in Hoenn that spends roughly 20 hours a day asleep, and I think that makes it the ideal subject for a sleep video. So let's talk about the professional loafer, Slakoth. Slakoth is a shaggy brown sloth, and its whole design is built around the joke that it does as little as physically possible. The Pokédex is very committed to this. It sleeps for the vast majority of the day. It lies about eating grass that happens to be within reach, so it doesn't have to move. Its heart rate is so slow that watching it is apparently quite relaxing, which, again, perfect for tonight. It's a creature that has looked at the concept of effort and firmly declined. And then, in the middle of its evolution line, something genuinely funny happens. Slakoth evolves into Vigoroth, and Vigoroth is the complete opposite. It's this wired, twitchy, white-furred thing that physically cannot sit still. The lore says its heart is beating so fast and it's so full of restless energy that it actually can't sleep. And lying down makes it more stressed, not less. So you've got this one family where the middle stage is basically the lazy one's coffee-fueled cousin who's had far too much and needs to go for a run. I've always found that transition brilliant, from a creature that won't move to a creature that can't stop. And then it settles down again, in a way, because Vigoroth evolves into Slaking, and Slaking goes right back to being enormous and lazy. But here's the clever bit. Slaking is, on paper, one of the strongest non-legendary Pokémon in the entire game. Massive stats. It should be terrifying, except it comes with an ability called Truant, which means it can only actually do something every other turn. The rest of the time it's just loafing, scratching itself, staring into the middle distance, recovering from the enormous effort of having done one thing. So it's this incredible contradiction. A creature powerful enough to flatten almost anything, held back entirely by the fact that it simply cannot be bothered to try 2 turns in a row. I love that as a piece of design. It's a joke and a balancing mechanic and a personality all rolled into one. A juggernaut that's its own worst enemy, purely through apathy. There's something almost philosophical about it, if you're the sort of person who finds philosophy at 1 a.m, which I clearly am. There's a nice connection in the games too. The player's own father, Norman, is a gym leader in Hoenn. He runs the gym in Petalburg and specialises in normal types. And a Slaking is his big finisher. So the first time a lot of us ran into one in a serious fight, it was against our own dad, which is a slightly strange family dynamic when you lay it out like that. You leave home, go off on an adventure, and eventually have to battle your father and his enormous lazy sloth. Very normal childhood. The whole Slakoth line is one of those little gifts the Hoenn designers gave us, where the creature is funny before you even do anything with it. You read the Pokédex, you have a little chuckle, and you move on. And that's a perfectly good reason for a Pokémon to exist. Not everything has to be a legendary guardian of the sky. Sometimes it's just a sloth that can't be bothered, and honestly, relatable. From a creature that does nothing, let's head somewhere darker and quieter, into the caves where a couple of Hoenn's stranger little residents like to lurk. There's a particular feeling to the caves in these games. Dim, echoey, a bit close, and 2 of the little oddities that live in Hoenn's dark places make a lovely pair to talk about together. Partly because they're both a bit gremlinish, and partly because in the original games you tend to find one in Sapphire and the other in Ruby, so they've always felt like 2 sides of the same coin. The first is Sableye, and Sableye is a proper little goblin. It's this small, dark, hunched creature that lives deep underground, and where its eyes should be, it's got gemstones. Glittering jewels for eyes. The lore is that it digs through the rock eating gems, and that eating them is what gives its eyes that crystal shine in the first place. So it's essentially a cave goblin that hoards and eats treasure, and stares at you out of the dark with jeweled eyes. There are old stories in the game's world about how seeing one was considered dangerous. This idea that it would creep up and steal your soul or your spirit, which is a lot of folklore for such a small chap. It's got a grin that doesn't quite sit right, and I mean that as a compliment. It's one of the more characterful designs in the whole region. The second is Mawile, and Mawile is the deceiver. From the front, it's this sweet, innocent little thing with a calm face, but it's got a second set of enormous jaws growing out of the back of its head, made of steel, like great horns that fold forward, and the whole trick of it is that it looks harmless and gentle right up until those jaws swing round and clamp down. The lore says it uses that innocent face to lull things into a false sense of security, and then, well, it's based on an old Japanese folklore creature, a sort of two-mouthed woman, which is a genuinely creepy bit of legend, and it explains a lot about why Mawile feels a touch unsettling underneath the cuteness. What I like about the pair of them is that they're both playing a game of appearances. Sableye looks like a spooky little omen, but is really just a gem-obsessed cave dweller, minding its own business. Mawile looks completely harmless, but is hiding a great steel bear trap on the back of its head. They're both not quite what they seem, in opposite directions, which is why they make such a satisfying duo to think about. A couple of small notes for the completists. Mawile was reclassified later on to include the fairy type, which suits its slightly fey, folklory nature down to the ground. And both of them got mega evolutions when the remakes came round, Sableye gaining an enormous gemstone it hides behind like a shield, and Mawile sprouting a second set of jaws, so it's got two of the things swinging about, which is exactly as much as that Pokémon needed, and not a single jaw more. But you don't need any of the later additions to enjoy them. They work perfectly, as they are. Two odd little cave creatures, one that looks scary and isn't, one that looks sweet and really, really is not. There's a lot of personality packed into the dark corners of Hoenn, and these two are a good chunk of it. Right, let's climb back out of the caves and head to the water, because there's a fish out there with possibly the most touching story in the whole region. And it starts by being the ugliest thing anyone's ever seen. Phoebus has a reputation, and the reputation is that it's rubbish. And I mean that affectionately, because the game itself is completely upfront about it. Phoebus is described, more or less officially, as the shabbiest Pokémon there is. It's a scruffy, tatty-looking brown fish with big dull eyes and torn-looking fins, and the lore says it's so unappealing that predators ignore it, trainers ignore it, and even the researchers can't be bothered with it. It just gets overlooked by absolutely everyone. But here's the thing, and it's the whole reason people adore it. Phoebus is a survivor. Underneath the sorry appearance, it's astonishingly hardy. It can eat just about anything and live just about anywhere, even in the murkiest, most weed-choked little puddle of water, and it'll be perfectly happy there. So it's this creature that the world has written off entirely, that thrives regardless, quietly getting on with it in the mud while everyone looks the other way. I've a real soft spot for that. And then it evolves, and it becomes Milotic. And Milotic is, according to the Pokédex itself, the most beautiful Pokémon of them all. This long, elegant, serpentine creature, cream and pink and blue, with these flowing eyebrow fins and a fan of a tail, said to have inspired artists throughout the ages. The transformation is about as dramatic a glow-up as exists anywhere in the series. The ugliest, most ignored fish in the region becomes the single most beautiful creature in it. As stories go, it's not subtle, but it doesn't need to be. It's a lovely idea that the thing everyone dismissed had all of that in it the whole time. Now, the way you actually get Phoebus to evolve is famously fiddly, and it fits the theme perfectly. In the Hoenn games, you couldn't just level it up. You had to make it beautiful. There's a hidden condition, essentially an inner beauty stat, and you'd raise it by feeding your Phoebus special treats, these things called Pokeblocks, until it was beautiful enough on the inside to transform. So the mechanic itself is about inner beauty leading to outer beauty, which is a lovely bit of design if you think about it, even if it drove people slightly mad at the time. In later games they simplified it to trading it while it holds a particular scale, but I'll always have a fondness for the original beauty contest version, and catching one in the first place was its own saga. In Ruby and Sapphire, Phoebus only lived in a handful of specific tiles on one particular route, Route 119, out of hundreds of possible fishing spots, and those tiles moved around. So finding a Phoebus at all meant patiently fishing spot after spot after spot along the river until you finally hit the magic patch. It became this quiet rite of passage. A lot of people never even realised Phoebus existed in their game because they never happened to fish in exactly the right puddle, which, again, suits it. Of course, the fish everyone overlooks is also nearly impossible to find. Melodic itself has a gentle sort of power in the lore. It's said that when there's fighting going on, it can release a wave of energy that calms angry feelings and ends arguments. A peacemaker. And there's a nice detail that some trainers actually prefer Phoebus and are a bit disappointed when it evolves, because they'd grown fond of the scruffy little thing exactly as it was, which I completely understand. Sometimes you love something for what it is, not what it could become. From the most beautiful thing in the sea, let's go and meet the biggest, because Hoenn's oceans are home to a creature so large it barely fits on the screen. Let me give you a number to sit with. Wailord, when it's fully grown, stretches to around 47 feet long. That made it, for a very long time, the largest Pokémon anyone had ever seen, though still shorter than many actual whales. And the lovely thing is that it starts out as one of the roundest, bounciest, most cheerful creatures in the region. That starting form is Wailmer, and Wailmer is basically a big blue beach ball with a face. It's this round, jolly thing that can take in water and puff itself up even rounder, and the games say it likes to bounce along the ground and spray water out of the blowhole on top of its head like a fountain. It's the kind of creature you can't look at without smiling a bit. All the menace of a bouncy castle. And then it grows and grows and grows into Wailord, this vast, gentle, blimp-shaped giant that cruises through the deep water of Hoenn's outer roots. And Wailord is gentle, that's the key thing. For all its size, it's a peaceful creature. It swims in these slow, majestic arcs, and the Pokédex has it leaping clear out of the water. This enormous thing breaching like a real whale, purely, it seems, for the joy of it. There's something very calming about the idea of it. A creature that big, just drifting through the blue, not bothering anyone, occasionally launching itself into the air because, why not? If I could be any Pokémon on a slow Sunday, it might be Wailord. Wailord's a good anchor for talking about Hoenn's open sea in general, because so much of the back half of the region is water, and it's got its own cast of characters out there. Not all of them are as friendly as a giant floating whale. You've got Carvanha for one, which is the opposite energy entirely. Carvanha's a small, vicious, red and black piranha, the bully of the sea, and it grows into Sharpedo, which is a proper torpedo of a shark with a rough hide and a nasty temperament. The lore paints Sharpedo as this brutal, fast predator that tears through the water, and that even other sea Pokémon give a wide berth. So the same ocean that holds this serene, gentle giant also holds these sleek, bad-tempered sharks. And I think that contrast is part of what makes surfing across Hoenn feel like a real place. It's not all calm. There are things down there, but mostly, when I think of Hoenn's sea, I think of the calm. The long stretches of blue between islands, the sound of the water, the sense that you could just keep surfing and see what you find. And Wailord's the spirit of that, really. This huge, unhurried presence, gliding along beneath you while you cross from one little town to the next. There's a nice bit of trivia I'll leave you with. Despite being one of the largest Pokémon by length, Wailord is also, weirdly, one of the least dense. It's so full of air, so buoyant, that pound for pound, it barely weighs anything for its size, which is how it manages to breach and float the way it does. A giant that's mostly air. There's something poetic in that, a creature that huge being that light, and it's the sort of detail I think about far more often than a grown adult probably should. Right, from the wide open water, let's go somewhere with a bit more heat, toward the volcano at the heart of the region, and the creatures that have made their home in all that ash and fire. Right in the middle of the Hoenn map, there's a great volcano called Mount Chimney, and it gives that part of the region a completely different feel to the coasts and forests. Warm air, ash drifting down, hot springs bubbling away at the foot of it. There's even a little town nearby, Laveridge, famous for those springs, where an old lady will hand you a Pokémon egg if you're polite. And the creatures that live up around the mountain are all built for the heat. Numel is my favourite of them, mostly because it's a bit dopey, and I find that endearing. It's a small, sturdy, camel-looking thing with a little volcano on its back, and the lore is delightful. It carries molten magma inside its body, apparently around 2,000 degrees of it, and yet Numel itself is so dim and dopey that it barely notices things happening to it. There's an entry that says it doesn't even register being rained on, or being hit, it's just plodding along, oblivious, with a furnace inside it. I find that combination of enormous internal power and complete cluelessness genuinely charming. It grows into Camerupt, which is a much bigger, grumpier, two-humped camel with actual volcanoes on its back that erupt when it gets angry. The idea is that the humps build up pressure and blow their tops when Camerupt loses its temper, which is a stressful way to live if you ask me, but a striking one. Then there's Torkoal, which might be the coziest fire Pokémon there is, and I mean that. It's a tortoise, an old, slow, wheezy tortoise, with a shell that looks like a lump of burning coal, and it burns coal inside itself to make its fire. When it's endangered, or when it's attacked, it puffs out clouds of black smoke from the holes in its shell. So its whole way of expressing emotion is little smoke signals. There's something so gentle and grandfatherly about Torkoal. It's not a fierce fire creature, it's a slow old tortoise having a quiet smoke to itself, and I love it for that. The mountain region ties into a nice bit of world building too. All that volcanic activity means the soil around there is incredibly fertile, and there's a farming town, Falabor, that exists precisely because the ash makes the ground so rich. It's the sort of small grounded detail that Hoenn does really well, connecting its geography to how people actually live in it. The volcano isn't just a set piece, it shapes the towns around it. I'll mention, without dwelling on it because we'll come back to the villains properly much later, that this fiery part of the region is where one of the two troublesome teams likes to hang about, the one obsessed with fire and land and expanding the continents. But they're a story for the legendary chapters, and I don't want to get into all that now. For the moment, they're just a bit of background flavour, some dramatically dressed people causing bother up a mountain. What I like about this whole volcanic pocket of Hoenn is how warm it feels, in both senses. It's a hot, ashy, glowing sort of place, and it's home to a dopey magma camel, a bad-tempered volcano camel, and a wheezy old coal tortoise puffing smoke rings when it's pleased. It's not the flashiest part of the region, but it's got a real character to it, a slow, warm, faintly grumpy character, and I always enjoy passing through. From the heat of the mountain, let's cross over into the sand, because there's a desert in Hoenn too, and something rather beautiful lives in the middle of all that dust. There's a stretch of Hoenn up on Route 111. That's a proper desert, sandstorm blowing the whole time, visibility down to almost nothing, the kind of place you need special goggles to even walk through. It's a harsh little pocket of the region, and I've always found it strangely atmospheric, this hazy, wind-scoured expanse in the middle of an otherwise green and watery place. And living down in that sand is one of my favourite evolution lines in the whole game. One that goes from slightly comical to genuinely beautiful. It starts with Trapinch, which is, let's be honest, mostly head. It's a little orange antlion with an enormous set of jaws and a tiny body trailing behind, and it lives at the bottom of a cone-shaped pit it digs in the sand. Anything that stumbles in slides down to the bottom, where Trapinch is waiting. The lore says its jaws are so strong it can crush rock, but it moves so slowly that if its prey escapes the pit, it hasn't a hope of catching up. So it's this patient little ambush predator, all bite and no chase, sitting in its sand trap waiting for lunch to come to it. There's a lovely detail that it can go a whole week without water, storing it up in its belly, which is exactly the sort of thing you'd want if you lived in a sandstorm. Then it evolves into Vibrava, and things start to change. Vibrava's a sort of half-formed dragonfly, its wings not quite finished. And the interesting thing is what those wings do. When Vibrava beats them, they make a buzzing hum, and that hum can create ultrasonic waves that mess with the heads of anything nearby. It's a strange in-between stage. This creature that's clearly turning into something, but isn't quite there yet. And then it becomes Flygon, and Flygon is genuinely special. It's this green desert dragon, ground and dragon type, with big rhombus-shaped wings and red goggle-like markings over its eyes to protect it from the sand. It flies through sandstorms, kicking them up around itself, so it's hidden inside a swirling cloud of dust. And here's the detail that made it so beloved for life. Its wings make a singing sound as it flies. There are stories in the game's world about people hearing this beautiful, faint singing coming out of the desert, unable to see anything through the sandstorm, and it's Flygon, hidden in the dust, its wings making that music. They call it the desert spirit. And I mean, come on, a dragon that lives in a sandstorm and sings to you from inside a cloud you can't see through. That's the good stuff. That's exactly the kind of quiet, mysterious lore I fall for every time. Flygon has this devoted following among fans that's a bit out of proportion to how it performs in battle. And I think it's precisely because of that mystique. It's not the strongest dragon in the game. It never has been. But it's got this gentle, otherworldly charm to it. The goggles, the green, the singing wings, the whole hidden in the sandstorm thing that makes people love it in a way that has nothing to do with stats. There was even a lot of hope for years that it might get a mega evolution, and the fact that it never has is a bit of a running heartbreak in the community. But maybe it doesn't need one. Maybe a singing desert dragon is already complete. I always find the Trapinch line a nice reminder that some of the best Pokémon start out looking a bit daft. A creature that's 90% jaws waiting in a hole becomes a beautiful, singing spirit of the desert. You'd never guess it from the antlion. From the singing sands, let's move on to a creature whose evolution does something no other Pokémon in the game does. It leaves a piece of itself behind. Here's the image I want to start with, because it's a quietly eerie one, and it's the whole reason this Pokémon is famous. When a certain creature in Hoenn evolves, it doesn't just change, it sheds its old body and walks away, and the empty husk it leaves behind gets up and comes to life on its own. And you'll only ever find that out by accident. The creature is Nincada, and Nincada's an odd little thing to begin with. It's a pale bug that spends most of its life underground, in the dark, drawing nutrients out of tree roots, almost never seeing daylight. It's based on a cicada nymph, the stage of a real insect's life it spends buried for years before it finally digs its way up. And that real-world detail is the key to the whole trick, because when a cicada emerges, it climbs out of its own skin and leaves the empty shell clinging to the tree. Nincada does exactly that. When Nincada evolves, it becomes Ninjask, and Ninjask is all about speed. It bursts up out of the ground into the light and becomes this fast, buzzing, cicada-like creature, one of the quickest things in the game, so fast it's said to be hard to even see. Great, lovely, a speedy ninja bug. That's the evolution you'd expect. But then there's the other bit. If, at the moment Nincada evolves, you happen to have a spare slot in your team and a spare Pokéball sitting in your bag, something else appears. The discarded shell The empty husk Nincada left behind is quietly there in the extra slot, and it's alive. That's Shedinja, and Shedinja is genuinely unsettling in the best way. It's a hollow brown husk of a creature that floats in the air, perfectly still, and it doesn't seem to breathe or move. The lore around it is properly spooky. There's a hole in its back, and the Pokédex warns you, in complete seriousness, not to look into it, because it's said to steal the spirit of anyone who peers inside. This from a children's game. I adore it, and Shedinja has one of the strangest quirks in the whole series to go with the strange lore. It permanently has just one hit point. One, it cannot have more. But it comes with an ability called Wonder Guard, which means the only things that can hurt it at all are a small handful of attack types that it's specifically weak to, and various forms of indirect damage. Everything else, all the ordinary attacks in the world, simply bounce off it as if it isn't there. So it's this ghostly empty shell that's either invincible to non-super effective direct attacks or dies to a single hit, with almost nothing in between, depending largely on what you throw at it, which feels exactly right for a creature that's basically a haunted husk hanging in the air. The thing I find lovely about all this is how quietly the game handles it. It never tells you Shedinja's coming. There's no announcement. You evolve your Nincada, and if the conditions happen to be right, you glance at your team afterwards, and there's suddenly this extra, silent, one hit point ghost you didn't ask for, made from the leftovers. Loads of people played through the whole game and never triggered it, never even knew it was possible, because you had to have that spare slot and spare ball at exactly the right moment. It's a secret hiding in plain sight, built right into the mechanics. It's one of the cleverest bits of design in Hoenn, honestly. They took a real insect fact, the way a cicada leaves its shell behind, and turned it into a genuinely eerie little ghost, with wonky rules and creepy lore, and then they hid it so you might stumble on it by accident. That's the sort of thing that makes these games feel deeper than they let on. From a creature that leaves itself behind, let's go, to one that spends its whole early life dreaming of the thing it can't do yet. Flying. There's a bit of wistfulness built into this one, and it's what makes it stick with people. Deep in Hoenn, in a cave system called Meteor Falls, there lives a small blue creature called Bargain, and Bargain has a dream. It desperately, hopelessly wants to fly. The trouble is, it can't. It's got no wings. It's a stubby little land creature with a very hard head and a longing it can't act on. And the lore about how it copes with that is honestly a bit heartbreaking. Bargain is described as throwing itself off cliffs over and over in the belief that one day it'll take to the air instead of falling. It never does, of course. It just crashes to the bottom every time. But its skull is so incredibly hard, harder than steel by some accounts, that all this throwing itself off cliffs doesn't actually hurt it. It just headbutts rocks to pieces and picks itself back up and climbs up to try again. So you've got this small, determined thing, absolutely convinced it's meant for the sky, flinging itself into the air and hitting the ground and refusing to give up. There's something genuinely moving in that, this creature that keeps trying to do the one thing it wasn't built for. Then it evolves into Shelgon, and Shelgon is the patient stage. It withdraws into this heavy, armoured shell, hardly moving, hardly eating, just waiting. The lore says all its cells are quietly changing inside that shell, building towards something, and that it stays hidden away because it can sense a great transformation coming. So the frantic cliff jumping stops, and instead there's this long, still, hunkered down, waiting, dreaming inside the armour. And then it happens. Shelgon's shell breaks apart, and out comes Salamence, and Salamence finally has its wings. It's a big red dragon, and the whole idea is that its lifelong desire to fly was so powerful that its body reshaped itself to grant the wish. There are entries that describe it flying in pure joy, wheeling through the sky, thrilled simply to be up there at last because it wanted this its entire life. When it's happy, it flies around scattering flames, not out of anger, just out of the sheer delight of finally being able to. I love that. The dream came true through nothing but persistence, and now it can't get enough of the sky. Salamence is what's called a pseudo-legendary, which is the fan term for these Pokémon that aren't technically legendary, but are enormously strong and take a real slog to raise. Every generation has at least one, and Salamence is one of Hoenn's. Getting one is a proper commitment. You catch a little cliff diving bargain, you wait through the long slow Shelgon stage, and eventually you're rewarded with one of the most powerful dragons in the region. And there's a nice sense that you've earned it, that the grind mirrors Bagon's own patience. It didn't give up, and neither did you. It got a mega evolution in the remakes as well, which turned it into this sleek, crescent-winged thing that could apparently reach ridiculous speeds, but I don't think that's the part that matters. The part that matters is the story underneath. A wingless creature that wanted to fly so badly it never stopped trying, and finally became a dragon. If you're looking for a bit of quiet inspiration at 1 a.m, you could do a lot worse than a small blue Pokémon repeatedly throwing itself off a cliff out of sheer stubborn hope. Meteor Falls, where they live, is worth a mention too, because that name is going to come back later when we talk about the things that fall from the sky and the ancient people who watch them. But we're not there yet. For now, though, we're nowhere near done wandering. There are whole corners of Hoenn we've not touched yet, ponds and forests and old memorial mountains, and dozens of creatures I've not so much as mentioned. So let's just keep strolling, at this same easy pace, and meet a good few more of them. Here's a nice pair of families to hold up next to each other, because they start out looking almost like cousins, and then grow into two of the most different creatures you'll meet in the whole region. One ends up a carefree party animal, and the other ends up a spooky forest guardian, and I find that lovely. The first family lives on the water. It begins with Lotad, which is this little green duckish thing with a big lily pad growing on its head, so wide and flat that it can ferry smaller creatures across a pond on its back, like a tiny living raft. It's easy going. It drifts about on the surface of ponds and lakes, and there's a real gentleness to it. It grows into Lombre, which is where a bit of mischief creeps in, because Lombre likes to lurk just under the surface of the water and grab at the feet of anyone fishing or wading, purely for the fun of startling them. A cheeky pond goblin, essentially. And then with the right stone it becomes Ludicolo, and Ludicolo is pure joy. It's this big, round, pineapple-headed thing that looks like it's wearing a sombrero, and its whole personality is built around music. The lore says that the moment it hears a cheerful, festive rhythm, it can't help itself. Its body starts moving, it fills up with energy, and it just breaks into a dance. It's a Pokémon that hears a good tune and has to boogie. I dare you not to smile at that. The second family looks similar at the baby stage, but takes a completely different road. It starts with Sinnoh, which is a little acorn that hangs from tree branches, so perfectly acorn-shaped that it can dangle there completely still and be mistaken for the real thing, which it uses to play pranks, swinging down to surprise people. It grows into Nuzleaf, a forest dweller with a long nose, and a leaf it plays like a little flute. And there's an unsettling note to it, because the sound of that flute is said to fill people with a vague sense of unease when they hear it drifting through the woods. And its final form is Shiftry, which is a proper Tengu, one of those long-nosed forest spirits from Japanese folklore. Shiftry is said to live at the tops of enormous, ancient trees, sometimes for 1,000 years at a stretch, and it can whip up powerful gusts of wind with the great fans it has for hands, strong enough to flatten everything around it. It's a guardian and a bit of a fearsome one, this quiet, watchful presence high up in the old trees. So you've got these two lineages that begin looking like they might be siblings, and one of them grows up to be a dancing, music-loving festival creature, and the other grows up to be a solemn, wind-summoning forest spirit that's lived for centuries. Sunshine and shadow, more or less. The pond and the deep woods. I think that contrast is a big part of why people remember them, and it's the sort of thoughtful little bit of design that Hoenn did really well, giving you two answers to the same starting question. Right, from the water and the woods, let's go somewhere with a lot of iron in it and meet a creature whose diet is genuinely alarming. Here's a fun fact that always makes me raise an eyebrow. There's a Pokémon in Hoenn that eats iron, not metaphorically. It eats actual iron, ore and metal as its main diet, and it builds its own steel body out of what it swallows. That's Aaron, and once you know that, everything about it makes sense. Aaron's a small sturdy little thing, a steel and rock type, shaped a bit like an armoured dinosaur with a big metal head. And because it needs so much iron to grow, it goes looking for the richest sources it can find, which unfortunately, for everyone, means railway tracks, bridges, and the steel frames of buildings. The lore has it happily munching through train rails and causing no end of bother for people, not out of malice, just out of appetite. It's a creature that treats human infrastructure as a buffet. There's something quite funny about a small metal dinosaur wandering off with a chunk of a bridge because it fancied a snack. It grows into Lyron, which is bigger and tougher and much more territorial. Lyron likes to live near springs and mountains where iron-rich water bubbles up, drinking that mineral water and feeding on the ore, and it gets very protective of a good iron source. When two Lyron want the same patch, they'll charge at each other and crash their steel bodies together, and the sound of them colliding apparently rings out across the mountains. And then it becomes Agron, and Agron is where the story turns from destructive appetite into something surprisingly noble. Agron is huge, this towering armoured beast with great horns, steel and rock, and it claims an entire mountain as its own personal territory. Now you'd expect that to make it a terror, and it certainly can be. But here's the detail I love. Agron is a genuinely devoted guardian of its mountain. The lore says that if a landslide or a forest fire damages its territory, Agron takes it upon itself to fix the place. It replants trees, it shifts soil, it tends to the mountain and nurses it back to health, restoring the whole environment it lives in. So this enormous, armour-plated creature that started life as a bridge-eating menace grows up into a careful, patient caretaker of an entire mountainside, from gobbling up railways to lovingly replanting forests. That's a proper redemption arc for a lump of walking iron, and it's the sort of hidden depth that makes me so fond of these designs. There's a megaform for it as well, which piles on even more armour, but honestly, the thing that stays with me is that image of Agron, quietly replanting trees on a scorched mountain. You look at it and you see a fearsome tank. You read about it and you find a gardener. I think about that more than I probably should. Anyway, from a creature that's all about metal, let's go to one that's all about noise. Because there's a family in Hoenn that takes a very timid little whisperer and turns it by the end into a walking wall of sound. Whismer is one of the most endearingly anxious creatures in the whole region, and its problem is very relatable if you've ever been a shy person in a loud room. It's this small pink thing with big floppy ears, and normally it keeps as quiet as it possibly can, mumbling and whispering to itself, barely making a sound. Which is sensible, because Whismer has a terrible predicament. When it does get startled or frightened and cries out, it cries so incredibly loudly that it frightens itself with the sound of its own voice. And then, of course, being frightened, it cries out again, even louder, and scares itself worse, and round it goes. So you get this poor little creature caught in a loop of its own making, wailing louder and louder purely because it can't cope with how loud it's being. Apparently, it can keep this up until it tires itself out completely and falls asleep. It's got these ear covers it can plug into its own ears to muffle the noise, which is the only thing that saves it. I find Whismer genuinely sweet. In a slightly stressful way, it's a creature that is its own worst enemy, done in entirely by the volume of its own panic. It grows into Loudred, and Loudred has made peace with being loud. Where Whismer was mortified by its own voice, Loud Red leans right in. It's a stompy, shouty, squarish thing with big speaker-like ears, and it uses its voice as an actual tool. It bellows loud enough to knock things flat, to shatter objects, to stun anything nearby, and it stomps its feet to build up the power for a really big shout. There's a detail that it goes temporarily deaf after its loudest cries, which is a nice bit of realism, and also that its ears work like speakers, so it's basically a small angry creature that is also a sound system. And then there's Exploud, the full-grown version. An Exploud is a walking pipe organ. Its body is covered in these tubes and ports, and it emits sound from all of them at once. It doesn't even really breathe the way you'd expect. It takes in air through the tubes and lets out these enormous, resonating roars that can be heard from miles away. The lore says it can communicate with others of its kind over great distances using sound too low for people to hear, and that its loudest cries can register like an earthquake. So the family arc is this brilliant journey from a timid little thing, too scared of its own whisper, through a stompy shouter, all the way to a creature that is essentially a mobile natural disaster made of sound. I've always liked that the noise line exists at all. It's such a specific, funny idea to build 3 Pokémon around. Not fire, not water, just what if the whole theme was volume? And they nailed the emotional arc of it too. From the shy one that can't handle its own voice to the confident one that turns the whole world into its speaker. There's a little lesson buried in there about growing into yourself, if you want to squint at it. Though mostly, it's just a good gag executed with real care. From the loudest creatures in Hoenn, let's shift to some of the fastest and add a bit of static crackle to the night with the electric ones. Hoenn's electric Pokémon have a lovely crackle to them, and I want to talk about 2 very different sorts. The speedy ones, and the cheerful little pair. The speedy ones are Electrike and Manectric. Electrike is a green dog, lean and quick, and the clever bit of its design is that its fur generates and stores static electricity, the same way you build up a charge shuffling across a carpet, except Electrike does it constantly as it runs. And it uses that stored charge to move even faster, discharging it to give itself little bursts of speed. So the running feeds the electricity, and the electricity feeds the running. There's a nice detail that on dry days you can apparently see the static sparking off its coat. It evolves into Manectric, which is this striking blue and yellow creature with a mane shaped like a bolt of lightning. And Manectric takes the whole thing up a level. It's said to create thunderclouds above itself using the electricity it discharges, and to move so fast that it seems to teleport, leaving a trail of lightning behind it. It gathers electricity from the atmosphere through that mane and stores enormous amounts of it. There's a megaform too, all wild, spiky mane, but the base creature is plenty striking on its own, a dog made of speed and static. And then there's the pair I have a real soft spot for, Plusle and Minun. These 2 are cheerleaders essentially, and they only really make sense together, which fits Hoenn's whole theme of bonds and relationships beautifully. Plusle is the plus one, Minun is the minus one, and they're built to support each other rather than to fight on their own. The lore is genuinely sweet. Plusle exists to cheer on its partner. When its teammate is doing well, it sparks and crackles with excitement, releasing showers of sparks like pom-poms, celebrating. And if its partner is struggling or losing, Plusle apparently sparks even harder to try to lift its spirits. And if things go really badly, it gets so upset on its partner's behalf that it cries showers of sparks. Minun does the same in the other direction, focused entirely on encouraging Plusle. They're a matched set, whose whole purpose is looking after each other. I think that's one of the most quietly touching ideas in the region. A couple of little creatures whose whole design is built around mutual support. They don't work as loners, they light up when they're together, and they root for each other. And their power in battle even flows through that partnership, each one making the other stronger, just by being alongside it. In a region literally named after the bonds between living things, Plusle and Minun might be the purest little expression of that idea going. Two small sparks that shine brightest when they've got someone to cheer for. There's something restful in that, actually, when you sit with it late at night. The idea of creatures who exist to encourage one another, who fall apart a bit when their friend is down, and blaze with joy when their friend does well. We could all do with a plusle in our corner, I reckon. From the crackle of static, let's cool right down now, and go somewhere cold. There's a cave in Hoenn that fills and empties with the tide, and some very round, very chilly creatures that live in and around the ice. I want to start this one with possibly the most agreeable creature in the entire region, which is Sfeel. Sfeel is a baby seal that is essentially a ball. A perfect round fuzzy ball with a little face and flippers. It's so round that the lore says it finds rolling around far easier than walking. So it just rolls everywhere it goes, and on ice it can really get going, spinning across frozen lakes faster than it could ever waddle. And here's the detail that finishes me off every time. When a Sfeel is happy, it claps its flippers together. And when one Sfeel starts clapping, the others nearby all join in. So you get this whole group of round little seals applauding, apparently just delighted about something. If there is a better mental image to drift off to than a circle of spherical seals giving each other a round of applause, I've not found it. Sfeel grows into Cialeo, which keeps the playful streak, but gets bigger and more curious. Cialeo has this habit of balancing things on its nose, spinning them, testing anything new it finds by its feel and smell. It'll ballot a Sfeel on its snout for the fun of it, and then it becomes Walrein, which is the grand old form, an enormous walrus with two great curved tusks. Those tusks aren't just for show. The lore says they're strong enough to shatter ice, that Walrein can smash through thick pack ice and even icebergs with them, and that its layer of blubber is so thick it can shrug off attacks that would flatten most things. So the round clapping baby grows into this massive, dignified, ice-breaking elder of the frozen seas. A nice arc from adorable to majestic. These three tend to hang about somewhere like Shoal Cave, which is a lovely bit of Hoenn design in its own right. A coastal cave that genuinely fills with water at high tide and drains at low tide, so the whole place changes depending on when you visit. Ice forms in parts of it. There's a real sense of the world ticking along on its own schedule, the sea coming and going, whether you're there to see it or not. While we're in the cold, I'll give a quick nod to Snorunt, another chilly one with a gentle bit of folklore attached. Snorunt is this small creature that lives in snowy country, wrapped up in what looks like a little hood, and the old stories in the games world say that a house visited by a Snorunt will prosper and do well, which is a warm thing to attach to a creature of the cold. It can grow into Glarly, a floating head of ice with a rocky core inside, said to be able to freeze its prey solid in an instant. And a female Snorunt can take a different path entirely, becoming Frostlass, a graceful, eerie spirit in what looks like an icy kimono, drawn from ghost story folklore about women lost in the snow, which is a lot of range for one little hooded snow creature, from a good luck house guest to a haunting winter spirit. There's something about the cold ones that suits a quiet night. Snowy caves, the tide slipping in and out, round seals clapping on the ice, an old walrus breaking a path through the flows. It's all very still and slow and white, easy to sink into. Right, let's warm back up and head toward the hot springs, because there's a little creature you're given as a gift near there, hatched from an egg, and its whole family's built around patience. Near the hot springs of Lavaridge, that little town at the foot of the volcano, there's an old lady who'll give you an egg if you stop and talk to her. And when that egg hatches, out comes Winort, which is one of the more cheerful little oddities in Hoenn. It's this small blue bean-shaped creature with a permanent happy expression and two little ear-like tufts with what look like tiny fists on the ends. And the lore about how Winorts spend their time is genuinely charming. They gather together in groups and they play by pushing against each other with those little padded fists, shoving one another back and forth, apparently to build up their patience and their strength at the same time. They also love sweet fruit, and there are stories of them working together to reach the best berries. There's a real sense of a playful, gentle, group-minded creature. Being handed one as a hatched egg makes it feel like a proper little gift, too. Something you raised from the start rather than caught in the grass. And Winnock grows into Wobbuffet, which is where the family's whole quiet philosophy comes into focus. Because Wobbuffet is all about patience and about never striking first, it's this big blue creature with a very deliberate, almost zen sort of presence. And the defining thing about it is that it will not attack of its own accord. It simply won't. It stands there and endures. It only ever acts in response, waiting patiently for an opponent to make a move, and then turning that move right back on them, counter-attacking with whatever was thrown at it. Its entire way of fighting is reactive. It absorbs, it waits, and it answers. There's something almost monastic about that. A creature that has decided the way to win is to never make the first move, and to let its opponent's own force be their undoing. There's a lovely and slightly secretive detail to Wobbuffet as well. That big round blue body you see, with the simple face, is not really the important part. Wobbuffet has a black tail, and that tail is the bit it guards most carefully. The lore strongly implies that the tail is where its true self is, its real vulnerable core, and that the whole reason it stays so still and defensive, the reason it puffs itself up and endures rather than attacks, is to keep that tail hidden and protected. It'll do almost anything to avoid revealing it. So the patience isn't just a fighting style, it's a creature carefully protecting a secret, keeping its real self tucked away and letting the big blue body take all the attention. I find that a genuinely intriguing bit of design, this idea that what you're looking at is essentially a decoy, and the true Wobbuffet is hiding in plain sight the whole time. If you watch the anime, you'll probably remember Wobbuffet as a running gag, forever popping out of its ball at the wrong moment with a cheerful cry, and that comedic side is real, but I think the games give it this quieter dignity underneath. A patient thing that endures, that never strikes first, that quietly guards its own heart. The kind of creature that has, in its own strange way, worked a few things out. From a creature all about patience and hidden depths, let's head somewhere fittingly solemn. There's a mountain in Hoenn set aside for remembrance, wrapped in fog, and the creatures that gather there are the ghosts. There's a place in Hoenn called Pyre, and it's unlike anywhere else in the region. It's a tall, foggy, quiet mountain set aside for remembrance, a memorial place where people lay their departed Pokémon to rest. Rows of graves, drifting mist, soft mournful music, candles. It's the counterpart, in the game's own lore, to the Cave of Origin, which is said to be where life begins. Pyre is where life ends, and because of all that, it's where the region's ghosts gather. I'll keep this one calm and gentle, because Pyre isn't really frightening, so much as it is solemn and a little sad, which suits a quiet night better than any jump scare would. The first pair are Shuppet and Banette, and their story is properly melancholy. Shuppet is a small, dark, floating creature with a single horn, and it feeds on emotions, specifically the darker ones. It's drawn to feelings like jealousy, spite, and grudges, and it grows stronger the more of them it absorbs. So it drifts toward houses where people are harbouring resentment, quietly feeding on the bad feeling in the air. And it grows into Banette, and Banette's lore is one of the saddest in the whole series, honestly. Banette is a doll, a plush toy that was loved by a child, and then thrown away, discarded and forgotten, and the grudge of being abandoned was so strong that the doll came to life as a vengeful spirit. It wanders, seeking the child that threw it away. It's got a zipper for a mouth, and there's this haunting detail that it holds its cursed energy in by keeping that zipper closed. When you know the story, you can't look at Banette the same way. It's not a monster. It's a heartbroken toy looking for the person who stopped loving it. That's a lot of feeling to pack into a Pokémon, and I think it's beautifully done. The other pair are Duskull and Dusclops, and they lean more into old bogeyman folklore. Duskull is a small floating creature that looks like a little reaper, a hood and a skull-like mask with one red eye, and it can pass straight through walls as it drifts along. The lore casts it as a sort of nursery tale threat, the thing parents warn misbehaving children about, the creature that will come for you in the night if you don't behave, and that once it starts following someone, it apparently won't give up until dawn. It grows into Dusclops, and Dusclops is genuinely eerie in a quieter way. Its body is completely hollow, an empty shell, and there's a single eye and a strange band across its face. The lore says its body is like a void, that anything pulled inside it simply vanishes, and that no one has ever seen what, if anything, is really in there. So it's this hollow wandering emptiness drifting through the fog of the Memorial Mountain. What I appreciate about the Mutpire ghosts is that none of them are evil, exactly. A little creature that feeds on negative emotions, an abandoned toy looking for love, a folklore bogeyman, a hollow wanderer. They're melancholy more than menacing, which fits a place of remembrance perfectly. There's a gentleness to how Hoenn handles death, this quiet, foggy, candlelit mountain where people come to grieve and the ghosts drift peacefully among the graves. It could have been played for scares. Instead, it's played for something closer to tenderness, and I think that's the right choice. Let's step down off the Memorial Mountain now and go somewhere older still, because there are creatures in Hoenn that weren't born at all in the usual sense. They were made long ago by ancient hands. There's a strange and rather wonderful idea sitting quietly behind these two, and it's the sort of thing I love finding in these games, where a throwaway little creature turns out to have a genuinely eerie backstory if you go looking. Baltoy is the small one, and at a glance it's just an oddity. It's a little clay figure, shaped a bit like a spinning top or an ancient doll, with a single foot it balances on, and it spends its time spinning. It moves by rotating, keeping perfect balance on that one point, and it's usually found near ruins and old ancient sites. Baltoy tend to gather in groups and spin together, all of them turning in the same direction, which is a strange and slightly hypnotic thing to picture. There's a detail that if a group of them all lean the same way at once, it might mean rain is coming, so people once watched them, almost like a little living weather sign. A cluster of ancient clay tops, spinning near the ruins, tilting together when the weather's about to turn. And then it becomes Claydol. And this is where the lore gets genuinely fascinating. Claydol is a much larger clay figure, with a row of eyes and multiple arms that float unattached to its body, and it hovers in the air, spinning, firing beams from its eyes. But the origin is the thing. The legend, as the game tells it, is that Claydol came to life from a clay figure that was made by an ancient civilization, an actual doll or idol crafted by people something like 20,000 years ago, that somehow stirred and became a living creature. So it's not an animal that evolved, it's an artifact that woke up. A piece of ancient pottery shaped by human hands in the deep past that at some point simply came alive and started drifting through the old ruins where it was made. I find that a beautifully strange idea, and it fits Hoenn so well. This is a region full of ancient, mysterious places, sealed chambers with braille on the walls, hidden tombs, old ruins in the desert and the sea. And Claydol is the living embodiment of all that. It's the past itself, given a shape and set gently spinning. There's a quiet melancholy to it, actually, when you think about it. Somewhere, thousands of years ago, someone made a clay figure, for a purpose we'll never know, in a civilization that's long gone. And that figure is still here, still turning slowly in the ruins, long after everyone who might have explained it has vanished. The maker is dust and the made thing drifts on. It ties into a thread that runs all through Hoenn, this sense of a deep and half-forgotten history sitting underneath the present-day adventure. You spend most of the game battling gym leaders and catching creatures in the grass, and then every so often you brush up against something genuinely ancient, a sealed tomb, a clay doll older than any city, a fossil in the desert, and you get this little shiver of how much older this world is than your journey through it. Clay doll is one of those brushes with deep time, a spinning relic that outlived its makers. Speaking of deep time, and things that outlived their makers, there's one more corner of Hoenn's ancient side I want to visit. Before we move on, the fossils and the one creature that never needed to become a fossil at all, because it simply never changed. Let's sink right back into deep time for this last one, because Hoenn keeps a few creatures from an age so distant it's hard to hold in your head. Out in that sandstorm-scoured desert we visited earlier, buried in the ground, you can find fossils and the region's scientists, the clever people at Devon Corporation, worked out how to bring what's in them back to life. 2 ancient creatures come from those desert fossils, and both of them are from a time when the sea covered places that are now bone-dry sand, which tells you how much the world has turned over since. The first is Lileep, and Lileep is barely an animal at all in the way we'd usually think. It's a sea lily, a creature that spent its life anchored to a rock on the ancient seabed, swaying gently in the current. It looks like a plant, with a stony base and these petal-like tentacles fanning out. And that's exactly the trick of it. It stayed perfectly still, disguised as a harmless bit of underwater flora, and waited. When some unsuspecting little creature drifted close enough, mistaking Lileep for a plant, those petals would close around it. A patient, rooted ambush hunter, dressed up as a flower, from around 100 million years ago. It grows into Cradily, a bigger version that can pull its base free and creep slowly along the seafloor. And the second fossil creature is Anorith, an ancient sort of armoured sea bug with 2 large claws and rows of little wing-like fins along its sides that it used to swim, propelling itself through those old oceans. It's considered one of the ancestors of much of the sea life that came after, a very early design that nature was trying out. It grows into Armaldo, which is bigger, tougher, and able to haul itself up on. Both of them only exist in the present day because someone dug fossils out of the desert and coaxed life back out of them, out of it. There's something quietly astonishing about that idea, that the sand of Hoenn hold the sleeping remains of an entire vanished ocean, and that with enough care you can wake one of its creatures up and watch it swim again, after an unimaginable stretch of time. The desert was a sea once, the fossils are the proof. And then there's Relaxation, which is my favourite note to end this ancient stretch on, because Relaxation never became a fossil. It didn't need to. It's a living fossil, a deep-sea fish that has, as far as anyone can tell, remained completely unchanged for around 100 million years. Every other creature around it shifted and adapted and became something new. Relaxation just carried on, exactly as it always was, cruising the deep ocean floor in the same shape it had when the fossil creatures we just met were still alive and well. It was found relatively recently, discovered lurking in the deep water, and the story goes that it was named in honour of the person who discovered it. Their name folded right into its own. A creature so old and so unchanged that finding one at all was a genuine event. And here's a nice thread to tie off with, if you were paying attention earlier. Relaxation is the very fish from that old Braille riddle in the sealed chambers. The one that has to stand at the front of your party with the great whale at the back to unlock the tombs of the ancient golems. Which makes a lovely kind of sense, doesn't it? Of course, the key to waking 3 ancient constructs is a creature that is itself older than almost anything else alive. The oldest fish and the biggest whale standing guard over the oldest golems. Hoenn does like to knit its ancient things together. That's a good wander through the region's ancient side. But there are still a fair few everyday faces we've walked straight past. The ones pottering about the towns and the coasts and the meadows, and they deserve a moment too before the night turns to the legends. So let's double back and meet a few more of them. Skitty is here mostly because it is very silly and very sweet, and sometimes that's reason enough. It's a small pink cat, and its defining behaviour is one that anyone who's ever owned an actual cat will recognise instantly. It is utterly, helplessly obsessed with chasing moving things, most of all, its own tail. The lore describes Skitty spotting its own tail out of the corner of its eye, and immediately giving chase, whirling round and round after it, getting dizzier and dizzier until it wears itself out and flops over. It chases anything that moves, really. Rolling objects, other creatures' tails, its own. With no particular thought as to why. It's pure, uncomplicated feline nonsense, and I love it for that. Not every Pokémon needs a tragic backstory or a cosmic purpose. Some of them are just a cat being a cat. It evolves with a moonstone into Delcatty, and Delcatty is the grown-up, dignified version. The cat that has decided it's above all that tail chasing now. Thank you very much. Delcatty is elegant and a bit aloof, and the lore leans into that beautifully. It doesn't keep a fixed territory or a set routine. It sleeps wherever it happens to fancy, eats whenever it feels like it, and generally wanders about living entirely on its own terms, refusing to be tied to any schedule. It's described as preferring a life without hassle, avoiding conflict, keeping its coat immaculate. So the hyperactive kitten that chased its own tail until it fell over grows into this poised, unbothered creature that simply does as it pleases and looks lovely doing it, which is, again, an extremely accurate arc for a cat. There's not a great deal of deep lore to mine here, and honestly, I think that's fine, even nice, at this hour. After the abandoned ghost dolls and the ancient clay figures and the fossils from a vanished sea, there's something restful about a Pokémon whose entire deal is chasing its tail and then growing up to nap wherever it likes. A palate cleanser, a little pink cat living its best, most relaxed life. If you want the tiniest bit of connective trivia, Delcatty's aloof, unhurried, do-as-it-pleases nature makes it a popular companion for people who want a low-maintenance, affectionate sort of partner. One that's content and easygoing rather than demanding. Which sounds like a fairly ideal housemate, if you ask me. From a tail-chasing whirlwind to a serene, self-possessed cat that has worked out exactly how it wants to live. We could all learn a thing or two from Delcatty. Let's stay in that easygoing mood, but change the shape entirely, and talk about a couple of Pokémon that are essentially walking stomachs. Right, walking stomachs, I said, and I meant it fairly literally. Gulpin is a small round green blob of a creature, and the lore is delightfully blunt about what's going on inside it. Almost its entire body is stomach. There's a tiny heart and a tiny brain tucked away in there somewhere, but the overwhelming majority of Gulpin is one big digestive organ, and it is powerful. The fluids in a Gulpin stomach are said to be able to dissolve just about anything it swallows, given a bit of time. So it drifts about, this little green bag of acid, gulping down whatever it comes across, and its body simply breaks it all down. There's even a detail that it has special enzymes that let it digest anything at all, no matter what it is. A creature that is functionally a very effective lytic grows into Swalot, which is a much bigger version of the same idea. A large purple blob with a wide mouth and a pair of yellow whiskers at the sides and a permanently unimpressed expression. And Swalot takes the swallowing to alarming new heights. The lore says it can open its mouth wide enough to gulp down things nearly its own size in a single go. No chewing involved, just an enormous swallow, and that it hunts by secreting a poisonous fluid from its skin. It doesn't have teeth, it doesn't need them. It simply engulfs whatever it's decided to eat whole and lets its stomach do the rest. There's something almost admirable about how uncomplicated its whole approach to life is. See thing, swallow thing, done. I find the Gulpin line quietly funny in a way that stays with me. It's not trying to be majestic or mysterious. It's a design built entirely around the joke of a creature that is mostly stomach and swallows everything, and it commits to that joke fully. And yet there's still a bit of care in the details, the enzymes, the heart and brain squeezed in among all that digestive machinery, the way it floats about rather than walks. It's a complete little creature, even if that creature's whole personality is being hungry. There's a version of this idea in a lot of ecosystems, of course, the humble creature that eats anything and everything and keeps the place tidy in the process. Gulpin and Swalot are Hoenn's take on that, dialed up to something faintly absurd, a pair of amiable blobs drifting about, hoovering up whatever crosses their path, deeply content with their lot. I have a lot of affection for a Pokémon that knows exactly what it is. From a creature that must swallow to a creature that must never stop moving. Let's talk about a little pig that bounces and would be in serious trouble if it ever stopped. Spoink might have the most stressful existence of any Pokémon in Hoenn, and it's played for comedy, but when you actually think about it, it's a tiny bit horrifying. In a way I find weirdly compelling, at one in the Spoink is a small grey pig-like creature that gets around by bouncing on its tail, bowing, 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 springing along like it's on a pogo stick, ogo stick. That's charming enough on its own. But here's the catch. Spoink has to keep bouncing. Its heart, according to the law, beats in time with its bouncing, and if it stops, if it ever stays still for too long, its heart stops with it. So Spoink cannot rest. It bounces all day, and it even keeps bouncing in its sleep somehow, because to stop is, quite literally, to die. There are stories of Spoink that have perished simply because they stopped hopping, which is an astonishingly dark bit of lore to attach to what is basically a cute bouncing pig, and it's exactly the sort of thing that makes me love these games. On top of that, Spoink has a pearl balanced on its head, and that pearl matters enormously to it. The pearl amplifies its psychic powers, so a Spoink is always on the lookout for a bigger, better pearl to boost itself further, and it treasures the one it's got. There's a genuinely sad little detail that a Spoink will search desperately if it loses its pearl, and that some have supposedly worried themselves to death over a lost one. So you've got this creature that can never stop moving and is fretting about a pearl the whole time. Bless it, it needs a lie down it can never have. It grows into Grumpig, which is a bigger, more composed version, and Grumpig has made much better use of that psychic pearl arrangement. It's got several black pearls set into its body, and it uses them to focus and channel its psychic power to a genuinely formidable degree. The lore says Grumpig performs a strange rhythmic dance to draw out that power, and that a Grumpig in the middle of one of these dances is not to be taken lightly. It's still tied to that rhythm, that constant motion, but where Spoink's endless bouncing was a frantic matter of survival, Grumpig has turned the same restless energy into something controlled and powerful. It's mastered the thing that ruled its earlier self. I think that's a lovely, if slightly grim, little arc. A creature born into this exhausting condition where it can never be still, that grows up to channel that very restlessness into strength and grace. From a panicked, bouncing pig fretting over a pearl to a calm, dancing master of psychic power. And it's all built on this one deeply strange idea that the beat of your heart is the beat of your feet, and you dare not stop. There's a whole philosophy in there if you want one, though mostly it's just a very good, very odd Pokémon. Let's head out into the desert one more time before we leave the everyday creatures behind, because there's a cactus out there that comes to life after dark. Back to the sand then, and to a creature that keeps very different hours to most. Cacnea is a little green cactus, round and spiky with stubby arms, and it lives out in the driest, harshest parts of the desert, where almost nothing else can cope. It's built for that. It stores water inside its body, so it can go a long while without a drink, and it flowers, apparently, only once a year, putting out a single bloom after a good rain, which is a lovely image. This prickly little thing producing one flower a year out in all that dust. It's not much bother, Cacnea. It just gets on with the difficult business of living somewhere nothing should be able to live. And then it evolves into Cacturn, and Cacturn is where it gets a bit spooky in that gentle Hoenn way. Cacturn is a taller, scarecrow-like cactus with a vaguely humanoid shape and a face that looks a touch sinister in the moonlight. And the key thing about it is that it's nocturnal. During the blazing heat of the day, Cacturn stays completely still, standing out in the desert, looking for all the world like an ordinary, harmless cactus, conserving its energy, waiting. And then, once the sun goes down and the desert cools, it comes to life and begins to move. The lore has this quietly unnerving detail that Cacturn will follow travellers who are worn down and stumbling through the desert at night, trailing along behind them, waiting for exhaustion to do its work. It's patient about it. It has all night, and the desert does most of the job for it. Now, I'll be honest, when you lay it out like that, it sounds properly menacing, a scarecrow cactus stalking exhausted travellers in the dark, but there's also something almost sympathetic in it. Cacturn isn't cruel. It's just an animal that's adapted perfectly to a brutal environment, hiding from the killing heat of the day and hunting in the cool of the night, using stillness and patience because, in the desert, those are the traits that keep you alive. It's the same patience we saw in the antlion, waiting in its pit, really, just scaled up and moved to the night shift. The desert rewards the ones that can wait. I've always thought the Cacnea line captures something true about deserts, which is that they're two completely different places depending on the hour. In the daytime, it's this hostile, blinding, empty expanse where everything sensible is hiding, and at night it comes quietly alive. All these creatures emerging into the cool dark to do their business under the stars. Cacnea is the desert by day, standing still and enduring. Cacturn is the desert by night, moving softly through the dark. Same creature, two worlds turning with the sun. Let's leave the sand behind properly now and go somewhere lighter, somewhere with a bit of gentle glow to it. There's a pair of firefly Pokémon in Hoenn that talk to each other in light. Here's a pair that fits Hoenn's whole theme of bonds and relationships about as neatly as any in the region, and they're gentle enough to be perfect for this hour. Volbeat and Illumise, the firefly Pokémon. They come as a set, a bit like a couple of the other pairs we've met tonight, one leaning male and one leaning female, and their whole existence is built around light and each other. Volbeat is the one with the glowing tail. It lights up its rear end like a firefly does, and here's the charming part. It uses that light to communicate, flashing signals to other Volbeat, and on warm nights, whole groups of them gather and fly together, and as they fly, they use their lights to draw shapes and patterns in the darkness. Geometric designs, traced in the night air by a swarm of little glowing tails. Can you imagine coming across that? A dark meadow and a cloud of soft lights weaving slow patterns overhead. It's one of the loveliest bits of behaviour in the whole regional dex, and it barely gets mentioned because Volbeat isn't a headline creature, but that image has stuck with me for years. And the reason Volbeat does all that light drawing is Illumise. Illumise is its partner, and she's the choreographer of the whole display. The lore says Illumise leads the Volbeat, using a sweet scent she gives off to guide them, directing the swarm to draw those patterns in the sky as a kind of courtship, a performance. She conducts, and they light up the dark for her. There's something genuinely romantic about it. This idea of one creature leading a whole glowing dance and the others tracing her designs across the night. They need each other for it to work. Neither the light nor the direction means much alone. Together, they make something beautiful out of a summer night. I think pairs like this are a big part of what gives Hoenn its warmth. We've already met Plusel and Minoon, the little cheerleaders who exist to support one another. And here are Volbeat and Illumise, who exist to make light together. In a region whose name is meant to evoke the bonds between living things, it feels deliberate that so many of its creatures come in these tender, cooperative pairs, designed from the ground up around companionship rather than solitude. It's a quietly lovely thing to build into a game about catching monsters. This recurring note that says the best things happen between two creatures rather than within one. So there they are, a little glowing firefly and the partner who leads his dance, tracing soft patterns across a dark meadow on a warm night. If you're drifting off, that's not a bad picture to drift on. Slow lights moving together in the dark. Let's move from the meadow to the coast now, and to the busy harbours of Hoenn, where the seabirds wheel about and one of them doubles as the local postal Hoenn. Being so watery, has proper seaside towns, and one of the biggest and busiest of them is Slateport, a port city full of markets and shipyards and the constant coming and going of boats. And wherever there's a coast like that, there are seabirds wheeling about over the harbour, riding the wind. In Hoenn, those are Wingull and Palipa, and they're the sound and movement of the seaside more than any grand legendary is. Wingull is the little one, a small white gull that soars over the waves. The nice detail about it is that it doesn't really flap much. It rides the sea breezes and the updrafts, gliding on outstretched wings, floating on the wind the way real gulls do, expending as little energy as possible. It bobs about on the surface of the water when it's resting, and it carries food and small items around in its beak, dropping by its nest to stash them. There's a breeziness to Wingull, quite literally, this sense of a creature that has learned to let the wind do the work and just enjoy the ride. On a coast on a windy day, that's exactly right. It grows into Palipa, and Palipa is where it gets both sillier and more useful. Palipa is a big, round-bodied pelican with an enormous bill, and that bill is the whole point. It's a huge, cavernous pouch, and Palipa uses it to scoop up prey and seawater in great gulps, the way a real pelican does, but it also uses it as a carrier. The lore describes Palipa storing food, small Pokémon, even eggs inside that big bill to transport them safely across the water. And that led to Palipa becoming, in the world of the games, a sort of postal bird, carrying letters and small parcels in its bill, flying them from place to place across the region. A living airmail service with a beak like a shopping bag. I find that genuinely charming. This big, daft seabird that doubles as the postman, cruising over the water with someone's letters tucked in its pouch. There's a whole texture to Hoenn's coast that these two bring to life. The markets of Slateport, the fishermen, the boats, the salt in the air, and the gulls turning overhead, and the big pelicans coming and going with the mail. It's the everyday, working, lived-in side of the region, the part that isn't about ancient legends or world-shaping titans at all, just people and creatures getting on with coastal life. And I think a region needs that as much as it needs its giants. The gulls riding the breeze are what make the sea feel like somewhere people actually live, rather than just a stage for the big drama. If you've ever spent time by the sea, you'll know the particular calm of it. The wind, the water, the birds wheeling about with no apparent hurry. That's Wingull and Palipa, the soft, breezy, unhurried heartbeat of Hoenn's coast. From the seaside, let's wander inland to a sunnier, greener spot and meet a gentle giant that grows its own fruit. Tropius is one of those Pokémon that I think is quietly perfect, and hardly anyone talks about it, which is a small injustice I'd like to correct before the night's out. It's a big, gentle, green dinosaur, sort of a cross between a sauropod and a leafy plant. With broad leaf-like wings it uses to fly, or at least to glide, despite being rather large and heavy-looking. It lives in warm, tropical parts of the region, lumbering peacefully through the jungle, and it's about as placid a creature as you could hope to meet. But here's the detail that makes it special, and it's such a warm idea. Around its neck, Tropius grows a bunch of fruit. Actual fruit, sweet and edible, that grows right there on the creature, as a natural part of the lore says that Tropius loves to eat sweet fruit itself, and that because it continually ate only its favourite fruit, fruit began to grow around its neck, and now the bunch of fruit around its neck ripens twice a year. Tarnuli. And in the world of the games, children love it. There are stories of kids in tropical villages growing up eating the fruit that Tropius provides. This gentle giant essentially acting as a living, walking orchard for the local children. It just wanders about, growing sweet fruit, letting children pick and eat it, entirely content. The fruit grows back twice a year, so there's always more. I mean, honestly, is there a kinder concept for a creature than that? A huge, peaceful dinosaur that flies on leaf wings and grows sweet fruit around its neck for children to eat. There's no menace in it at all, no tragic backstory, no cosmic weight. It's just pure, uncomplicated gentleness. A big, soft herbivore that gives freely of itself and asks for nothing but a warm day and something green to munch on. In among all the ghosts and the acid blobs and the world-ending titans, Tropius is this little island of warmth, and I think that's exactly why I'm so fond of it. It suits the mood tonight too. There's something deeply restful about the whole picture. A hot, still, tropical afternoon, dappled green light coming through the jungle canopy, this enormous, kindly creature ambling slowly along, fruit ripening at its neck, a couple of children trailing behind hoping for a snack. Nothing is happening. Nothing needs to happen. It's just a peaceful giant on a warm day, and the world turning slowly around it. If more of the world worked like Tropius, growing good things and sharing them and drifting gently through sunlit afternoons, I suspect we'd all sleep a good deal better. It's a lovely creature to have in your head as the night settles. We've one last stop before we go quiet for the legends, and it's a fitting bridge, because these two came from the same place a lot of Hoenn's deepest mysteries seem to come from the sky and from beyond it. Let's end this long wander through Hoenn's everyday creatures on a slightly mysterious note, with two that seem to have 1 foot in this world and 1 foot somewhere far beyond it. Solrock and Lunatone, the sun and the moon, more or less. They're a matched pair like so many of Hoenn's creatures, but where the others we've met tonight were partners in cheer or in light, these two are more like two halves of the sky itself. Solrock is the sun. It's a rocky creature shaped like a stylized sun, with points radiating out all around a central face, and it's said to draw in solar energy and give off light and heat of its own, warming the air around it. It's an active, daytime sort of presence, tied to the sun the way you'd expect. Lunatone it's a smooth crescent and circle shape with a single red eye, and it's tied to the lunar cycle, said to be most active around the time of a full moon. Hoenn wanes. There's an eerie detail that anyone who meets Lunatone's gaze is supposedly frozen stiff with a kind of chill, which suits its cold moonlit nature. One is warmth and daylight, the other is cold and moon glow. The sun and the moon given rocky little bodies, and here's the thread that ties them to the deeper mysteries of the region, and to a place we've mentioned once or twice tonight. Both Solrock and Lunatone are said to have come from space. The lore has it that they arrived from beyond the sky, associated with meteorites, appearing after a meteor shower, which is why they turn up around places like Meteor Falls, that cave named for exactly the sort of falling stars these two are meant to have ridden in on. So they're not native to Hoenn at all, not really. They're visitors, little pieces of the sky and of space that came down and settled here, going quietly about their business, ever since, warming the air and freezing the unwary, keeping time with a sun and a moon. They may have travelled a very long way to be near. I like ending on them because they point ahead, gently, to where the night is going. Because the closer we get to the legends of Hoenn, the more the region starts looking upward, and Meteor Falls and the ancient people who once made their home there. Sky there. The serpent that patrols the edge of space. The strange thing that fell from the stars and became something alive. Solrock and Lunatone are the little heralds of all that. The everyday creatures that quietly remind you Hoenn has always had one eye on the heavens. But that's for later, when you're hopefully well on your way to sleep. For now, before we get to the great ones, let's slow the pace right down with a couple of the calmest creatures in the whole region. The sort that spend their days in quiet meditation, or hanging in the breeze making soft, chiming sounds. A gentle place to rest for a moment before we turn to the legends. These two are about as suited to a quiet, winding down sort of night as any Pokémon in the region, because their entire way of life is meditation. Meditite is a small, calm creature that lives high up in the mountains, and it spends almost all of its time meditating. That's not a quirk or a hobby, it's the whole point of it. The lore says Meditite meditates constantly to sharpen its mind and heighten its inner energy, eating only a single berry a day, sitting in stillness on some remote mountain ledge, quietly building up its focus. There's something wonderfully peaceful about that image. A little creature perched cross-legged on a cliff, high above everything, doing nothing but sitting with its own mind, day after day, patiently getting stronger through sheer calm. It grows into Medicham, and Medicham is what all that meditation was building toward. It's a lithe, graceful, yoga master sort of creature, a fighting and psychic type. And the idea is that decades of meditation have honed its mind to the point where it can sense the thoughts and movements of anything around it, and even, in the more fanciful lore, use that heightened spiritual energy to create illusions and seem to vanish. It's said that a Medicham that has meditated long enough can predict its opponent's moves before they make them, reading the flow of a fight through pure focus rather than strength. So the power here doesn't come from muscle or from raw force. It comes from stillness, from patience, from the long, slow work of quieting the mind, which is a genuinely lovely thing for a fighting creature to be built on. I think there's a real gentleness in the idea that Meditite and Medicham get their strength the way they do. Most of the powerful creatures we've talked about tonight earned it through some kind of struggle, throwing themselves off cliffs, eating iron, waiting in the dark. Medicham earned it by sitting quietly with itself on a mountain for a very long time. There's no drama to it, just breath and focus and patience and the slow accumulation of a calm, clear mind. And out of all that quiet comes something genuinely formidable. If you're lying there trying to drift off, you could do worse than to picture a Meditite on its mountain ledge, high up, still unbothered, breathing slowly, the whole busy world going on far below, while it simply sits with its own thoughts and lets them settle. That's more or less the state we're all after at this hour, isn't it? The quiet mind. Meditite's been practicing it for its whole life. We could take a leaf out of its book. From a creature that finds its peace in silence, let's finish with one that makes a soft and soothing sound, the kind you might hear on a warm evening with the windows open and a breeze coming through. And so we come to Chimecho, which might be the single most soothing creature to end on before the legends. Because Chimecho is essentially a living wind chime. It's a small, gentle, psychic creature, shaped a bit like a bell or a chime, pale and round with a little tail, and it has a habit that I find genuinely lovely. It uses a sucker on top of its head to hang itself from the eaves of buildings, or from tree branches, dangling there like an ornament, swaying in the breeze. And as it sways, it makes sounds, soft, chiming, bell-like cries that drift out on the wind. The lore is really quite beautiful about this. Chimecho's cries are described as crying out in a variety of tones, ringing like a set of chimes, and those sounds carry on the wind across long distances, so that people might hear the faint, sweet chiming of a Chimecho somewhere off in the distance without ever seeing it. It communicates through these tones, and it can put real emotion into them. So a Chimecho's song can be cheerful, or mournful, or calm, depending on how it feels. There's something almost musical about the idea. This little creature hanging from the roof of a house, singing softly to itself and to others of its kind, its voice carried away on the evening air. If you've ever sat somewhere on a warm night and heard actual wind chimes ringing gently in the dark, you'll know the exact feeling Chimecho is built around. That soft, aimless, peaceful sound that seems to belong to the evening itself. It's a rare creature, Chimecho, not one you stumble across easily, which suits it. It feels like the sort of thing you'd only encounter if you were quiet and patient, and in the right sleepy corner of the region, at the right time of day. And there's a little one associated with it too, a tiny bell called Chingling that came along in later games, which jingles with a high, clear sound when it moves. A smaller, younger version of the same gentle idea. But it's Chimecho I want to leave you with, swaying under the eaves, chiming softly in the breeze. There's really no better note to rest on before we go quiet. All night we've wandered through this warm, watery region, meeting its cool lizards and its clapping seals, and its bouncing pigs and its ghost dolls, and its fruit-growing giants. And now, at the edge of the legends, we arrive at a small creature that simply hangs in the wind and sings. No grand purpose, no cosmic weight, just a soft chiming sound drifting through a warm evening, rising and falling with the breeze. So let that be the sound you carry into the last of it. The gentle chime of a little bell Pokémon, somewhere off in the dark, ringing softly as the wind moves through. Wind moves, and with that peaceful sound in your ears, let's drift out to the warm shallows for one last gentle pair, and then the oddities, and then the legends, and then sleep. Let's finish the everyday creatures where Hoenn is at its most inviting, out in the warm, clear, shallow water near the coast, the sort of place you'd happily float about in on a lazy afternoon. Two gentle creatures live there, and they suit the mood of a quiet night down to the ground. The first is Corsola, which is essentially living coral. It's a small pink creature with branching coral growths sprouting from its back, and it lives in warm, southern seas where the water is clean and clear. And here's the lovely detail, and a slightly telling one. Corsola can only live in unpolluted water. Where the sea is clean and warm, Corsola thrive, their coral branches growing bright and healthy. Where the water turns dirty, they can't survive at all. So the presence of Corsola in a stretch of sea is a sign, in the world of the games, that the water there is pure and the environment is healthy. There's something quietly meaningful in that. A creature so tied to the cleanliness of its home that finding one is proof the place is being looked after. And there's a gentle bit of biology too, that its coral branches can break off and simply grow back. So Corsola quietly repairs itself over time, mending its own little reef. The second is Luvdisk, and Luvdisk leans right into being sweet. It's a small, pink, heart-shaped fish, and its whole identity is built around love and affection. It lives in those same warm shallows, often around coral reefs, and it's drawn to happy couples, apparently gathering in the warm waters, where people in love come. The folklore in the games world is that if a couple happens to spot a love disc together, it's a sign of good fortune in love, a blessing on the relationship. Ationship. Fishermen and romantics alike keep an eye out for them. It's unashamedly gentle, a little heart-shaped fish that swims about the warm reefs, spreading good wishes to anyone lucky enough to find it. And I think that's a rather perfect note to end the everyday creatures of Hoenn on, because it brings us right back round to what the whole region is supposed to. That name, meaning something like abundant region, a kind of circle of plenty, e.g. things. All night we've been meeting creatures built around connection, the cheerleaders who exist to support each other, the fireflies who light up the dark together, and now a coral that only lives where the world is being cared for, and a little heart-shaped fish that blesses the love it finds. Hoenn keeps coming back to this, to warmth and to bonds, and to the quiet importance of looking after things and each other. So there they are, drifting in the warm, clean shallows as the light goes gold on the water. A living coral that proves the sea is healthy, and a heart-shaped fish wishing well to everyone it meets. It's a soft, kind, hopeful place to leave the everyday creatures of Hoenn, and a soft, kind, hopeful place to rest for a moment before the night turns, at last, to the ancient ones. Just a few genuine oddities remain before we do, the true one-offs, the creatures that don't fit anywhere else. So let's amble gently through those last few curiosities now. Let's just amble through a few of Hoenn's odd ones now, the creatures that are interesting in their own right, but don't need a whole grand story around them. Think of this as flipping slowly through a naturalist's notebook. No particular order, just whatever catches the eye. I'll start with Absol, because it's one I feel a bit protective of. Absol's this striking white creature, a bit like a sleek hound with a great curved blade growing from the side of its head, and it lives up in the mountains away from people. And it's got a terrible, undeserved reputation. It's called the disaster Pokémon, because it has a knack for sensing when something awful is about to happen. An earthquake, a storm, a tidal wave, and it comes down from the mountains to try to warn people before it hits. But of course, because it always turns up right before a catastrophe, people got it completely backwards somewhere down the line and decided Absol must be causing the disasters. So this poor creature that's essentially trying to save everyone gets blamed for the very things it's warning them about, and gets driven away for its trouble. It's a lovely, slightly sad bit of lore, the misunderstood messenger, and it's why Absol has such a devoted fan base. Everyone loves an underdog who's been unfairly judged. Next, a pair that genuinely cannot stand each other. Zangoose and Seviper. Zangoose is a fierce white mongoose-like creature, and Seviper is a big purple viper with a blade-tipped tail, and they are locked in an ancient, bitter, generations-long feud. It's written right into the game's own descriptions of them. Zangoose's fur bristles the moment it catches Seviper's scent, and Seviper nurses a multi-generational grudge against Zangoose in return. It's based on the real-world enmity between mongooses and snakes, and the neat touch is that in the games they were split across the two versions, so you'd usually only find one of them in your copy and have to trade for the other. Two creatures that hate each other, kept in separate games. There's a certain poetry to that. Then there's Spinder, which I mostly love for one specific piece of trivia. Spinder's a dizzy little panda-ish creature that walks in a permanent wobble, like it's perpetually a bit tipsy, staggering about and somehow dodging attacks by accident, because even it doesn't know where it's going next. But the famous thing is the spots on its face. Every single Spinder has a slightly different spot pattern, and the number of possible arrangements runs into the billions. So in theory, no two Spinder you ever meet are exactly alike. Each one is genuinely unique. That's a lovely little idea to slip into a game. A creature where every individual is one of a kind, even if barely anyone would ever notice. A quick one for Kecleon, the master of disguise. It's a chameleon, so naturally it can change the colour of its body and blend into its surroundings, becoming nearly invisible, apart from a zigzag stripe across its middle that it can never quite hide no matter what. I always found that detail charming. It can vanish almost completely, but there's always that one stripe giving it away. In the games, it turns up as these invisible obstacles you have to reveal, which was a source of much confusion at the time. And finally, Cast Form, the little weather creature. It was made by scientists at a place called the Weather Institute, and it changes its shape depending on the weather around it. Sunshine gives it a fiery form, rain gives it a watery one, snow gives it an icy one. It's a small cloud-like thing that just becomes whatever the sky's doing. There's something quite peaceful about a creature that simply reflects the weather back at you. No drama, no agenda, just softly turning sunny or rainy along with the day. That's a good handful of Hoenn's curiosities. A misunderstood warner of disasters, two eternal enemies kept in separate games, a wobbling panda where everyone is unique, an almost invisible chameleon that can't hide one stripe, and a little cloud that dresses for the weather. None of them are the biggest names in the region, but they're the sort of detail that makes a place feel properly alive, and I'd hate to have skipped them. Now though, we've wandered long enough among the everyday creatures, it's time to go quiet and slow and start talking about the ancient ones, the giants that were sealed away, the guardians of the sky and sea, and the strange visitors from far beyond. Let's begin underground, with 3 sleeping golems and a puzzle written in raised dots on a wall. There's a particular kind of quiet that comes with the sealed chambers of Hoenn. And I mean that. To find the 3 golems, you have to go looking for hidden tombs scattered around the region, and every one of them starts the same way, with a wall covered in braille. Actual braille, raised dots, that you have to translate to work out what to do next. There's something wonderfully hushed and old about that. No flashing lights, no fanfare, just a dark room and a message written in dots for anyone patient enough to read it. The 3 sealed away in these tombs are Regirock, Regita, and Registeel, and they're a set. Regirock's a golem built out of boulders, this lumbering figure of rock that's said to repair itself, with fresh stones when it gets damaged, which is why it's got that patchwork, cobbled together look. Regisi is made of ice, cloaked in air so cold it's hard to even put a number on. Ice that apparently can't be melted, even by fire, formed during an ice age long ago. And Registeel is the one made of a strange dense metal, harder than any ordinary steel, its body said to have been tempered by enormous pressure underground over countless years. Rock, ice and steel. Some people reckon they're meant to represent the Stone Age, the Ice Age and the Iron Age, 3 great stretches of the distant past, which I think is a rather elegant idea if it's true. The lore behind them is genuinely good, and it got deeper as the series went on. These 3 were created long ago by a much larger golem, their master, a Pokémon called Regigigas, who according to legend was the one that hauled the continents themselves into place and then shaped these 3 in its own image, out of rock and ice and magma. And after all that, people grew frightened of their power, and so the golems were sealed away in these hidden tombs, locked behind puzzles, left to sleep. Regigigas itself went to sleep too, far away, and it wouldn't actually turn up in the games until a later region, but the sense of it being their creator hangs over the whole thing. They're not wild animals, they're made things, ancient constructs, worshipped and then feared and then buried. The puzzle to reach them is the part everyone remembers, and it's brilliantly obscure. Down in the main sealed chamber, the braille gives you a riddle, and the riddle is essentially this. First comes one particular Pokémon, last comes another. And what it means is that to open the tombs, you have to arrange your team just so, with a specific ancient fish called Relicanth in the very first slot of your party, and an enormous whale called Wailord in the very last slot. 2 very specific creatures in 2 very specific positions, and then the ground shakes and the tombs unseal. There was no real way to just guess that. People shared it, worked it out together, passed it around, and it became this shared secret of the Hoenn generation. I've always loved that the key to 3 legendary golems is, of all things, a small fish and a big whale, standing in the right order, and once they're unsealed, each golem waits in its own separate resting place. One out in the desert, one on a lonely island, one in a tomb of its own, and you have to make your way to each in turn. Solve one more little riddle of movement to open the inner chamber, and there they are. These silent, ancient, handmade things, waking up after who knows how long. There's a stillness to the Regis that I find really suits a quiet night like this. They don't have the drama of the great weather beasts we're building toward. They're patient, sleeping constructs, sealed in the dark, waiting in silence for someone to read the dots on the wall and remember the order of a fish and a whale. Made by an ancient giant, feared by ancient people, and then simply left. There's a calm melancholy to that which I think is quite beautiful. From the sealed tombs of the golems, let's move to something lighter and swifter. A pair of creatures that glide, that share thoughts between them, and that hold the distinction of being the first of their kind in the whole series. Here's a small piece of history that I think is lovely. Latias and Latios were the first legendary Pokémon ever to have a gender. Every legendary before them was a single, sort of genderless being. But these two came as a pair, a sister and a brother in effect. Latias always female, and Latios always male, and that made them feel different straight away. Warmer somehow, more like family than like forces of nature. They're called the Eon Pokémon, and they're built like little living jet planes, streamlined and elegant. Dragon and psychic types that glide through the air at tremendous speed with their arms tucked in like wings. Latias is the gentler of the two, a bit shyer, leaning toward defense, and Latios is the braver, more assertive one, leaning toward attack. And they share this beautiful ability the lore calls sight sharing, where one of them can show the other exactly what it's seeing, projecting the image into the other's mind. So the two of them are always, in a sense, looking through each other's eyes. There's a real tenderness to that. This idea of a bond so close that they quite literally share their vision. Latias has another lovely trait. She can fold down her feathers and refract light around herself to take on the appearance of a person, disguising herself and moving among people unseen. That gift is at the centre of the film they starred in, one of the animated Pokémon movies, set in a beautiful canal city where the two of them serve as its secret guardians, protecting a precious relic tied to their own kind. It's one of the more emotional films, and it did a lot to make people fall for these two. If you've seen it, you'll know the one. It's got a bittersweetness to it that stays with you. In the games, they're what's known as roaming legendaries, which means they don't sit and wait for you in a fixed spot like the golems do. Once you finish the main story and become champion, one of them starts wandering the whole region, appearing here and there as you travel, fleeing almost the instant you meet it, so that catching it becomes this long, patient chase across Hoenn. Which one roams and which one you might find elsewhere depended on your game and your choices. And there was a rare special island, the Southern Island, reachable only with an event ticket that most people never got their hands on, where you could find the other one. So for a lot of players, one of the Eon duo was this half-glimpsed thing forever darting away at the edge of the map, and the other was a rumour of an island they'd never visit. That elusiveness suited them. They're creatures of flight and disguise, after all. Of course, they're hard to pin down. They share a treasured item too in the lore, something called the Soul Dew, which the film reveals to be, in a way, the crystallized soul of one of their kind. It's a quietly heavy idea for what's ostensibly a children's series. The notion that a Pokémon's very soul could be held in a jewel and passed on. And it's the kind of depth Hoenn kept slipping in when you weren't quite expecting it. Much later, in the remakes, both of them gained mega evolutions, turning a deeper shade and flying faster still. And there's this genuinely magical bit where you get to soar across the whole region on the back of one of them, seeing Hoenn from the sky the way they do. But even without any of that, the heart of the Eon duo is simple and gentle. A brother and sister who share what they see, one shy and one brave, gliding together over a region they quietly watch over. The first legendaries with a family bond, and still one of the sweetest ideas in the whole series. From two swift, gentle guardians of the air, we come to the two enormous forces they can't calm, the land and the sea themselves, and the ancient rivalry between them that shaped Hoenn in the first place. Let me tell you the old story, the one the whole region is built on. and I'll tell it slowly, the way a legend should be told. A very long time ago, before there were people to see it, two enormous creatures were born out of the raw natural energy of the world. One of them was Groudon, and Groudon had power over the land. The other was Kyogre, and Kyogre had power over the sea. And in those first ancient days, they weren't enemies. Groudon simply set about raising up the continents, making the land, drying and expanding it. And Kyogre set about filling the oceans, calling down rain, widening the seas, each one shaping the world in its own way. But somewhere along the line, the two of them met, and they became rivals. And the rivalry between the land and the sea turned into a war. A slow, titanic, world-shaking war. Groudon expanding the land, Kyogre expanding the water, the two of them clashing again and again over which force would rule. And in the legend, that endless battle is where the Hoenn region itself came from. That balance of land and sea you see on the map, that yin and yang shape, is the leftover of these two ancient giants fighting to a standstill. The people of that time could do nothing but watch and be afraid. That's the myth, and the games take that myth and make it the heart of the plot. Because there are two teams of troublemakers in Hoenn, and each one has got hold of half of this old story and completely misunderstood it. One team, obsessed with the land, wants to wake Groudon and use it to dry up the seas and create more ground for people. The other, obsessed with the sea, wants to wake Kyogre and expand the oceans to give Pokémon more room. Both of them think they're doing the right thing. Both of them are, of course, about to unleash a force that will tear the region apart. And when one of these giants does wake up, the weather goes completely mad. Wake Groudon, and a brutal, blazing drought scorches everything. The sun turned merciless. Wake Kyogre, an endless torrential rain floods the world. The sky itself breaks depending on which one stirs. The two of them represent these great elemental spheres, if you want to think of it grandly. Kyogre holds dominion over all the water of the world, the seas and the rain. Groudon holds dominion over the land, the ground, and the heat that dries it. They're not really animals at all. They're closer to walking pieces of the planet, the sea and the earth given a shape and a will. Kyogre is this vast whale-like leviathan, covered in markings that glow when its power is at its peak. Groudon's this huge, red, dinosaur-like continent of a creature, all plates and ridges, magma running through the seams of its body. Standing next to either of them, you're standing next to something the size of a natural disaster. And when the remakes came round, they added another layer to all this called primal reversion, which is the idea that these two can revert to an even more ancient, more powerful form, the way they were at the very beginning of the world, overflowing with that primal energy. Primal Groudon and Primal Kyogre are these terrifying enhanced versions. Their weather-shaping power turned up to something almost absolute, the harshest sun and the heaviest rain imaginable. It's the game's way of showing you what these two were really like back in the primal age, before anyone thought to be afraid of them, when they simply were the forces they command. There's a nice detail in the lore that they're each tied to an orb, an ancient artifact, a red one for Groudon and a blue one for Kyogre, and holding the right orb is what lets a person wake and even control them, which is exactly the sort of dangerous knowledge those two teams go chasing after, with the disastrous results you'd expect. But of course the story doesn't end with the land and the sea locked in their endless fight, because there's a third one. There always was. Something that lives higher up than either of them, that only comes down when the other two have gone too far. And that's where we're going next. High above everything, higher than the clouds, higher than birds ever go. Up in the thin, cold layer of air near the edge of the sky, there lives a serpent. It almost never comes down. It coils through the ozone layer, feeding on water and particles and the odd meteoroid that drifts in from space. And it's said to have lived like that for hundreds of millions of years. That's Rayquaza, and it's the one that ends the war. I love Rayquaza, and I think it's the way it sits above the other two, both literally and in the story. Groudon and Kyogre are the land and the sea, forever at each other's throats down on the surface. Rayquaza is the sky, and the sky doesn't take a side. It just watches, drifting through the high air until the fighting between the land and the sea grows so violent that it threatens to wreck everything. And then, and only then, Rayquaza descends. It comes down out of the heavens, this vast green dragon, and its sheer presence is enough to make the other two stop and back down and return to their sleep. It's the peacemaker. The one that restores the infan terminology. It's called the Trio Master. The one the other two answer to. There's a place in Hoenn where you can go to meet it, and it fits perfectly. The Sky Pillar, an ancient crumbling tower out over the water, so tall it feels like it's reaching for the place Rayquaza lives. You have to make your way up through it, floor by floor, and at the very top there it is. The thing from the edge of the sky, waiting, and climbing that tower to reach the Sky Serpent is one of the more atmospheric bits of the whole region. It feels like a pilgrimage. The design draws on some genuinely old mythology, which I always find satisfying. There's a lot of the classic long wingless, serpent-shaped dragon of Japanese legend in it, the kind that traditionally holds power over water and the weather, which suits a creature that lords it over the beasts of the sea and the land. Some people see a bit of Quetzalcoatl in it too, the feathered serpent of Mesoamerican myth, a sky god associated with the wind and the boundary between earth and heaven. Either way, it's tapping into this deep, worldwide idea of a great sky serpent that keeps the forces of nature in their place. That's a fine thing to build a Pokémon on. And then the remakes gave Rayquaza its crowning bit of lore, and it's a big one. They revealed that when the ancient battle between Groudon and Kyogre once grew truly out of control, in their most powerful primal forms, the ordinary Rayquaza wasn't enough to stop them. And so, drawing on the collective wish of an ancient people, the Draconid people, who had passed down the memory of Rayquaza saving them long ago, and drawing on the power of a meteorite it had swallowed, Rayquaza did something no Pokémon had ever done before. It mega evolved. It was the very first mega evolution in all of history, the origin of the entire phenomenon, and in that transformed state it finally overwhelmed the two primal giants and forced peace. So Rayquaza isn't just the Sky Guardian of Hoenn. It's the source of one of the biggest mechanics in the whole series, the first ever to make that leap. That same story ties into a bit of the remakes called the Delta episode, where a meteor is falling toward the world, and it's Rayquaza, and the memory of the Draconid people that has to save everyone, flying up to shatter the falling star, which brings the whole thing full circle, this ancient serpent from the edge of space, defending the world from something coming out of that same space. There's a grandeur to Rayquaza's story that I don't think many Pokémon match, the patient guardian above the sky, older than nearly everything, that comes down only when it's truly needed. From the great serpent of the sky, we come now to the gentler mysteries of Hoenn, the rare special ones, the ones tied to wishes and stars, and things that fell from far away. And the first of those is a creature that spends almost all of its life doing exactly what I hope you're about to do. Sleeping. Of all the creatures in Hoenn, this is the one I most wanted to save for the quiet end of the night, because Jirachi is a Pokémon that sleeps, and its whole gentle legend is wrapped up in sleep and wishes. It feels right to reach it now when you're hopefully drifting. Jirachi is tiny and soft-looking, a small pale creature, almost like a child's paper decoration, or a little star come to life, with these streamers trailing from its head and a calm, closed-eyed face. It's what's called a mythical Pokémon, the rarest sort, the kind that were only ever handed out at special events. Rather than found in the wild, so most people have only ever seen it in pictures or in its film, and its story is one of the loveliest in the series. Here's how the legend goes. Jirachi sleeps. Not for a night, not for a season, but for 1,000 years at a stretch. And it only wakes for 7 days, once every 1,000 years, when a comet passes overhead. This thing, sometimes called the Millennium Comet. While it's awake, Jirachi can grant wishes. There are tags, little strips of paper, attached to the streamers on its head, and it's said that any wish written on those tags will be granted while Jirachi is awake. And then, once the comet has passed, it wraps itself back up and sleeps for another 1,000 years. There's a detail I adore too, which is that even while it's fast asleep, if something threatens it, it can defend itself without ever waking up, fighting on pure instinct with its eyes still shut. A creature so peaceful, it doesn't even interrupt its sleep to protect itself. I think what gets me about Jirachi is how kind the whole idea is. It's not a guardian of anything, not a force of nature, not a titan. It's just a small sleeping thing that, for one brief week in 1,000 years, grants the wishes of anyone with a pure enough heart to reach it. There's no grand battle in its nature. It's gentle all the way down. Its film leans right into that, following a lonely child who befriends Jirachi during its 7 waking days and has to say goodbye when the comet passes and it's time for it to sleep again, and it's every bit as bittersweet as that sounds. A friendship on a clock measured against 1,000-year sleep. There's a nice bit of series trivia tucked in here as well, for those who like that sort of thing. Jirachi belongs to a little lineage of these small round mythical Pokémon, one from each of the first few regions, all built along similar lines, all rare, all gentle, each with its own film. Jirachi's the one that Hoenn contributed to that quiet family, and it fits Hoenn perfectly, a region so much about bonds and abundant relations that its wish-granting mythical is all about the connection between a sleeping creature and the hopes of the people who find it. If you're the sort who likes a thought to drift off on, you could do worse than Jirachi. Somewhere out there in the legend, a small star-shaped creature is sleeping and will sleep for centuries yet. And when the comet next comes round and it opens its eyes for those 7 days, it'll grant the wishes written down for it and then quietly close them again. There's a real peace in that image, a patient, kindly thing, dreaming through the centuries, waiting to make someone's wish come true. We've one more to meet before we let the night settle, and it's the strangest of them all. Because while nearly everything in Hoenn was born of the land, or the sea, or the sky of this world, there is one creature here that came from somewhere else entirely. Everything else we've talked about tonight belongs to Hoenn, born of its land, its sea, its sky, its ancient legends. Deoxys is the odd one out, because Deoxys came from space. And I don't mean that in a vague, poetic way. I mean its origin story is, quite literally, that it fell from the sky as something that wasn't even alive in the usual sense, and became a Pokémon out there in the dark before it ever reached us. The legend, as much as anyone can piece it together, is that a virus drifting through space was struck by a laser beam, and that strange collision mutated it into a living thing, into Deoxys. So its very name is a nod to that, to the building blocks of life itself, and its whole design is built around the idea of DNA, this creature that looks almost like a strand of genetic code stood upright, all crystalline and alien and not quite symmetrical. It's got a crystal set into its chest, and that crystal, the lore says, is its actual brain, and it acts as a kind of organ that lets it fire beams of energy. There's something deeply unsettling and fascinating about a creature whose brain sits exposed on the outside of its body like a jewel. It doesn't look like it belongs here, and that's entirely the point. It doesn't. The strangest thing about Deoxys, and the thing that set it apart from every mythical before it, is that it can change its form. Most Pokémon are one shape, and that's that. Deoxys shifts between several completely different configurations depending on the situation, rearranging its own body. There's a balanced normal form, an attack form, all sharp and offensive looking, a defense form that hunkers down and armors up, and a speed form built lean for racing about. Same creature, 4 different shapes, chosen to suit the moment. It's this constantly reconfiguring alien intelligence, and even mechanically, it broke the usual rules of how these mythical creatures were built. It simply doesn't play by the same design principles as anything around it, which, again, suits something that came from beyond the sky. In the games, it was tied to a lonely remote place, a little event island out in the middle of nowhere that most players could only reach through a special distribution, and there you'd find it waiting, this strange visitor sitting quietly at the far edge of the map. And there's a loose thread of rivalry in the wider lore between Deoxys and Rayquaza, which makes a lovely kind of sense when you think about it. Rayquaza is the guardian of the sky, the serpent that patrols the boundary between our world and space, feeding on the meteoroids that drift in. And Deoxys is a thing from space that came through that boundary. So of course the sky's guardian and the visitor from beyond it would be circling each other. One protects the edge of the world, the other crossed it. I think Deoxys is the perfect note to end the creatures on, because it leaves you with a sense of mystery rather than a neat conclusion. Everything else in Hoenn, however grand, is of the land golems, the sea and sky titans, the wish-granting sleeper from Johto. They all belong here, except for the space visitor, Dolong here. And then there's this one strange, shifting, crystalline thing that fell from the stars and doesn't quite fit any of it, sitting alone on a distant island, watching us with a brain it wears on its chest. A little piece of the cosmos that ended up in a warm, watery region, shaped like a symbol of balance. There's a wonder in that I never quite get to the bottom of, and I'm glad of it. And with that, our slow wander through Hoenn is very nearly done. So there we are, that's Hoenn, near enough. A slow lap around a region I've always been fond of, from the little partners you pick out of a professor's bag to the strange visitor sitting alone on an island at the edge of the map. If you're still with me, which I rather hope you're not by now, think back over where we've been tonight. A cool little leaf-tailed lizard that never panics, a fish everyone wrote off that turned out to be the most beautiful thing in the sea, a dragon that threw itself off cliffs until it finally learned to fly, golems sleeping behind walls of braille, a serpent drifting at the edge of the sky, coming down only when the land and the sea forget themselves. It's a lot of life for one region, and I've barely scratched it, honestly. There are dozens more I didn't get to, and maybe I'll do another wander through them some other night, if you fancy it. What I keep coming back to with Hoenn is that balance it was built on. The land and the sea curled around each other, neither one winning. You can feel it the whole way through, in a region that's half water and half ground, where the ancient story is about two great forces held in check by a third, and where the very name means something like abundant relations. It's a place about things held in gentle equilibrium, about bonds and balance and a kind of quiet harmony underneath all the adventure. And I think that's why it makes such easy company at the end of a long day. It's a warm, watery, well-balanced place. And it doesn't ask much of you, so let it settle now. No more facts, no more creatures, nothing left to keep track of. Just the picture of a region shaped like two forces at peace, its giants sleeping in their caves, and its guardians watching over the sky and the sea, and a small star-shaped creature somewhere out there, dreaming through the centuries, waiting for a comet. Rest well,